owner of the US Mega Farmest video is purement para intratnamiento y no infringe de recos de originales. Los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 876 200,000 for a touch. After a chaotic chase, the two finally made a deal at a price of $7 million. Originally, it was nothing to spend an extra $200,000, but Kinzu didn't know what was wrong. When the transaction was over, he muttered to himself, $200,000 for one touch is not too expensive. Just this sentence, if Dale and Erica hadn't seen the situation and took Kinzu away in advance, it is estimated that Haley would have used her big red Maserati to send Kinzu directly to heaven. Of course, Kinzu's escape did not mean that the matter was over. Haley had made up her mind to teach this shameless guy a lesson. Kinzu certainly didn't know what Haley was thinking now. He finally escaped from the tiger's mouth, and he was sitting in the night the 15th, wiping the cold sweat on his forehead. You said crazy woman, how dare she really hit it? Chen Mu's mouth twitched, and he turned his head to the side, deciding not to participate in this topic. Dale, who was driving, also rolled his eyes, thinking that if it were me, I would have hit it too. Seeing no one responded, Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly, and did not continue the topic, but asked, Brother Chen, where are we going now? Let's go to Winthrop and Chelsea first, and then if there is enough time, we can go to Wybury, Somerville, and Cambridge. Chen Mu picked up the folder beside him, flipped through it, and said with a smile, if time is running out, we can go to the remaining 3 tomorrow. Waving his hand, Kinzu lay back in the seat, and said somewhat listlessly, I will just take a look at these 2 stores, and you can decide on the rest, I won't go. Chen Mu was a little moved by what he said, and did not say politely to Kinzu. He nodded and said with a smile, Boss, don't worry, after the acquisition is completed, I will show you the documents for your review. Kinzu smiled, said nothing, closed his eyes and began to take a nap. He was not really confident in Chen Mu. He did not have the courage to let others make the decision on the acquisition of hundreds of millions of dollars. However, if Jefferson was with Chen Mu, it would be another matter. Soon, after nearly dozens of minutes of travel, night the 15th arrived at the town of Chelsea. Chelsea here has nothing to do with the top Premier League club. It is purely a micro-community that has risen around this prosperous port. Small wine shops and big ideas are the best interpretation of this micro-suburb of Boston. The development of the vibrant port and trade industry has formed an impression of bravery and fortitude here. Not only that, many people have higher expectations for Chelsea, even the Boston government. With government funding, the old buildings near Chelsea Harbor are gradually being transformed into sustainable loft buildings, and boutiques and cafes are also moving in. Despite this, Chelsea's corner market is still the most popular place. Standing on the busy dock, looking at the sea with ships coming and going, Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief. It's really nice here, much better than Boston. Yes, Chen Mu nodded, standing beside Kinzu, looking at the Boston city not far away, and said with a smile, the city is too noisy. Although it's very busy here, it gives people a sense of comfort and leisure. That's true. Kinzu smiled and followed Chen Mu to a block not far from the port. This is the most prosperous street corner market in Chelsea. Boss, the prosperity here is not much worse than that in Chinatown. Walking on this white street, Chen Mu looked at the crowded crowd on the street and shrugged. If Chinatown is the place where all the Chinese in Boston gather, then this is the center of the entire Chelsea area. No matter what race, they will come here to stroll around when they have nothing to do. But the level here is a little insufficient, right? Looking at the busy shops around, Kinzu frowned slightly. Just as he said, although the business atmosphere here is very prosperous, its location also destined its grade to be not too high. There is no way, just like the specialty stores or duty-free shops opened in the airport, the things there are cheaper than those in regular stores, but they are often things that the company cannot sell or are defective. Because the customers there are from all corners of the country, it is very likely that he just passes by once, buys something and leaves, and there will be no after-sales trouble. Therefore, the merchants will not plan to have repeat customers, they will sell one by one, and cheat one if they can. There is nothing we can do about it. Chen Mu spread his hands helplessly. Although the grade here is not too high, it is not too low either. After all, it is very close to Boston. Okay, you can do whatever you want, as long as you don't lose money. Seeing that Chen Mu had made up his mind, Qinzu smiled and didn't say anything else. He just remembered some things in his previous company and asked subconsciously. As they talked, they walked to a 2-story building not far from the block. "Boss, look here." When they came downstairs, Chen Mu stopped and gestured with his hand. Qinzu heard that and stopped as well. He didn't rush to look, but looked around first. It didn't matter if he didn't look, but after looking around, Qinzu was immediately surprised. It's nothing else, it can only be said that the location here is really good. Because the location of this small building is right at the intersection of a T-shaped intersection, there is a road in front of the door, just leading to the port. "Boss, look here." Noticing Qinzu's gaze, Chen Mu said with some pride, "When the time comes, we just need to put the restaurant sign higher. I believe that as long as you are not blind, you can see our sign at the first glance when you come to the port." Looking at Chen Mu with some surprise, Qinzu didn't expect this guy to be so efficient. However, after looking at the shops that were still in business, Qinzu asked with some concern, "They are still in business, will they sell it?" "Of course." Chen Mu patted his chest and said with a smile, "I have already inquired clearly. The merchants here only have a lease with the landlord, and the landlord has asked them before that they do not have enough funds to buy the store." "Okay, in that case, you go and talk to the landlord, and we will go to the next one first." Qinzu was completely relieved at this time, and simply stopped asking questions and let the two of them go. He is now a little impatient to return to the ranch and return to his worn mansion. Recommend a new book to friends, Traveling Through Time and Becoming a Catman. If you like it, you can go and have a look. Chapter 877 Alaskan Pig. Beep beep, with 2 faint car horns, the ears of Daho and her, who were dozing on the soft carpet of the ranch mansion, immediately stood up. Woof woof woof, under the surprised gaze of Zumengyo and Eva, the 2 little guys ran out in the confused eyes of their friends. "What's going on?" Putting down the chopsticks, Zumengyo stood up and walked out. "Wait, let me ask who is here first. Why didn't the bodyguards report it?" Pulling Zumengyo, Eva picked up the walkie-talkie and contacted the 2 female bodyguards at the door. A moment later, Eva put down the walkie-talkie, and a few rays of joy flashed in her eyes. "It's the boss who's back." Hearing this, Zumengyo was no longer in a hurry. She turned around and sat back in her seat. Under Eva's surprised gaze, she smiled and said, "Since it's him, there's no need to go out. This guy has been out for so long, and he finally came back." Shrugging her shoulders, Eva said that she didn't understand the Oriental view of love. Why did they suppress it when they missed him so much? But since Zumengyo didn't go out to greet him, as a subordinate, she naturally couldn't go out to greet him, so she had to sit down honestly. However, the eager expression made Zumengyo speechless. "By the way, can't you hide it better?" However, she didn't care about this now. Although she said she was not excited, her absent-minded look was a good interpretation of what it meant to say one thing and do another. Bang! Woof woof woof, with the sound of the car door closing, the 2 little guys' cries became louder. At the same time, the man's hearty laughter, even through a wall, was clearly heard by the 2. The 3 remaining little guys in the room woke up at this time, climbed up and rushed to the door. While running out happily, Daho kept muttering, "You were a good husky. I usually treat you as a brother. I didn't expect that you would become a lackey as soon as the master came back." Xiao and Betty behind him looked at each other and felt ashamed. Aren't they lackeys? Surrounded by a bunch of little guys, Qinzu walked into the villa with difficulty, carrying large and small bags in his hands. "My wife, come and help me get these guys away." Surrounded by the excited little guys, Qinzu, who was a little difficult to move, cried and asked Zumengyo in the restaurant for help. Seeing this, Zumengyo, who was watching the joke on the side, came over with a smile. "After all, they are still close to you. You have been away for so long, but they have never been so close to me." Qinzu rolled his eyes when he heard it, and looked at Daho and Xiaohe who were chewing on his trouser legs, and said unhappily, "Is this what you call closeness? They are obviously hungry, okay?" After Qinzu said this, Zumengyo also noticed the actions of Daho and Xiaohe, and couldn't help but put her hand to cover her forehead. "This little guy, is it so hungry?" Qinzu broke free from the entanglement of the little guys, sat on the sofa, looked at the little guys in front of him, and asked curiously, "How long have you not fed them? From what you said, it seems as if we deliberately abused it." Zumengyo rolled her eyes, sat down next to Qinzu, stretched out her hand to signal the front, and Daho obediently handed over its paw. "Isn't it because they are too fat, so I feed them less at each meal?" "That's true, too." Kinzu touched his chin, reached out to pick up Xiao Hectares, touched its small body, and shook his head. It still needs to lose weight. Why is there so much fat? The little guys who were originally wagging their tails happily to welcome their owner back, thinking that they could be liberated, suddenly wailed, and even their tails drooped down. Kinzu didn't care about this, and tapped the heads of the little guys with his hands. Look at you, you are almost like Alaskan pigs. Can you still walk if you keep eating? Alaskan pigs? Zumengyo and Diva looked at each other, both feeling a little puzzled. Isn't Alaskan a sled dog? When did another pig breed come out? After Kinzu taught the little guys a lesson, he looked at the two girls' puzzled expressions, smiled and found a video on his phone, and explained. Alaskans that are as fat as pigs, or Alaskan pigs for short. The two girls had the same expression when they saw the little dogs in the video walking on 4 short legs and falling down even when running. Wow, what a cute little dog. Zumengyo snatched the phone, looked at it carefully from the beginning, and then gave Kinzu a very charming smile. Hubby, can we raise a few Alaskans? Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, looked at the 2 huskies and 2 little tigers at home with some shame, and asked with a sad face. Wife, aren't you afraid that they will eat your husband out of money? Why do you still raise them? Seeing that Kinzu seemed reluctant, Zumengyo immediately put down her phone, threw herself into the arms of basketball shoes, and said coquettishly. Okay, let's raise a few too, look how cute they are. Kinzu has always had no resistance to the request made by women when they are acting coquettishly, and agreed to it in a daze. Okay, we will raise as many as you say. Yeah, husband is the best. After giving Kinzu a kiss on the face, Zumengyo turned around and ran upstairs. Hey, wife, where are you going? I'm going to see where I can find some authentic Alaska. We'll go buy some tomorrow. Kinzu came back to his senses and looked at Zumengyo's back in surprise. He felt as if he was about to fall out of favor. Clean, have you eaten? Seeing Zumengyo go upstairs, Eva came up and the smile on her face made Kinzu feel warm. Thank you for your hard work these days. Is everything okay at home? Standing up and coming to Eva, Kinzu reached out and gently stroked her golden hair. He felt a little guilty for Zumengyo's thoughtfulness. He knew that this girl was deliberately leaving space for the 2 of them to be alone. After spending some time with Eva in the living room, Kinzu couldn't resist the hunger in his stomach and dragged Eva straight to the restaurant. But when he arrived at the restaurant and looked at the messy table, he realized that he had miscalculated this time. Although he successfully gave Zumengyo and the others a surprise, he also successfully made himself hungry. Hey, I didn't cook for you today. Let me go and fry some steaks for you. Seeing this, Eva giggled a few times and wanted to go to the kitchen. However, she was stopped by Kinzu. Forget it, you take a rest, I'll do it myself. Chapter 878 Free Adoption. I don't know if it was learned from Kinzu, but since coming to the United States, Zumengyo has changed her somewhat nagging personality and has become very efficient. The next morning, not long after the sun rose, Kinzu, who was sleeping soundly on his big bed, was pushed awake by the beautiful Zhu next to him. Honey, I saw on the internet that someone has a pet to give away. Let's go and take a look. Holding the phone in one hand, Zumengyo pushed Kinzu next to her with the other hand, wanting him to get up and take a look. Kinzu opened his eyes with some difficulty, stretched his waist, and muttered with tears in his eyes. Wife, we didn't go to bed until after 2 o'clock yesterday, can't you let me sleep a little longer? I didn't ask you to sleep so late. My waist is sore. Zumengyo rolled her eyes at Kinzu, and didn't give him the chance to continue sleeping. She held the phone in front of him and asked with a smile. Husband, come on, what do you think of this? Kinzu rolled his eyes helplessly, reluctantly moved his head, leaned over to take a look, and immediately felt a little amused. I say, wife, we don't lack that little money, we can just go to the pet store to buy it later. This one doesn't even cost money, it must not be a purebred. How could it be? Looking at the photo on the phone, Zumengyo said with some disbelief. Look at this photo, it's exactly the same as the one on the internet. Seeing that it was impossible to continue sleeping, Kinzu simply stopped sleeping, stretched his waist and sat up directly. Rubbing his sleepy eyes, Kinzu put his arm around the beautiful Zhu's waist, and leaned his head on her shoulder. He smiled and exclaimed, Wife, purebred Alaskan sled dogs are not cheap even in the United States. Who would be so stupid as to give away green dollars? But I think they are all the same. Zumengyo curled her lips. Although she felt that what Kinzu said made sense, she was still unwilling to give up when she saw the cute puppies on the website. Okay, let's go here first. Kinzu smiled helplessly and said nothing. At most, it would be a long trip. After getting up and washing up, the two went downstairs to the restaurant. Before they sat down, several little guys came up. The little guys, who didn't know they were about to become second-class citizens, wagged their tails one by one, holding the plates in their mouths and circling around the table. Clean, you should take care of them yourself in the future. Eva shrugged and stood aside, looking at Kinzu with some teasing. There was no way. Every time she saw the pitiful eyes of the little guys, she couldn't help but add more food to their plates. Kinzu rolled his eyes at the girl when he heard this, thinking, you can't bear it, can I bear it? However, in order to prevent these guys from turning into Alaskan pigs, Kinzu decided to reduce their rations. Although it was a reduction, Kinzu looked at the several large pieces of beef on each guy's plate and shook his head helplessly. Woof woof woof. After quickly finishing the beef on his plate, Daha stuck out his little tongue and smacked his lips, feeling that something seemed wrong. He turned his head to look at his brother and saw that there was no more on his plate. He couldn't help but look up at his master, with confusion in his little eyes. Kinzu smiled and spread his hands when he saw this. No more, that's all for today. If you want to eat more, go outside and solve it yourself. Hearing what Kinzu said, the little guys looked at each other, turned over, and lay on the ground to play rogue. Woo-woo, or woo-woo, but no matter how cute they acted and asked for a hug, Kinzu shook his head firmly, spread his hands, and that was it. Finally, Zumengyo couldn't stand it anymore, so she turned around and took a few big apples from the dining table, cut them in half, and put half in front of each guy. Now, Betty was happy. She opened her big mouth and half of the big apple went into her mouth, and swallowed it with a few crunches. She was happy, but the little friends around her were not very satisfied. Daha and her were better, they could eat some fruit, although they didn't think it tasted as good as beef, but it was better than nothing. Daha and Shia were a little anxious. They were tigers, when had they ever eaten vegetarian food? Facing the gazes of Kinzu and Zumengyo, the two little guys turned their heads to the side firmly. I won't eat yours. When they turned their heads, Betty was happy again. It's okay, if you don't want to eat, I'll eat it for you. The two bear paws grabbed two hearts of apple from the plates of the big tiger and the little tiger in a lightning speed, and stuffed them into their big mouths under their stunned gaze. Crunch, well, it would be even better if there was some honey. After swallowing the apple in her mouth, Betty licked her chubby little paws and sighed inwardly with some regret. Oh, woof woof woof, the big tiger and the little tiger, who were a little anxious, got up and surrounded Betty from front to back, baring their teeth and roaring at her. However, perhaps because they were led astray by the Husky brothers, the roars became a little distorted. They were obviously two pure-blooded jaguars, but now they have become as fierce as huskies. I don't know if the white tiger will be angry to death if it knows. But according to Kinzu's estimation, it shouldn't be. After all, the animal world is not like humans. Parents can still take care of you for half your life. They are different. Some of the better ones will raise their offspring. Birds, on the other hand, are only responsible for giving birth to their children. As for whether they live or die, it has nothing to do with them. Okay, no fighting. Kinzu saw that Betty also wanted to fight, so he quickly separated them. This little brown bear is no longer the same as when it first came. At the time, a little husky could bully it. But now, it has successfully grown into a little fat brown bear. Even if several little guys come together, they may not be able to beat them. After being pulled apart by Kinzu, the little brown bear rubbed Kinzu's thigh with some grievance. He was obviously helping them not to waste food, so why didn't they appreciate it? Kinzu flicked Betty's round little head twice in annoyance, and scolded with a smile. From now on, you can only eat the food on your own plate. If I find you dare to steal theirs again, I will starve you for a day. Other methods may not be useful to deal with the little brown bear, but starving for a day is really a surefire move. After hearing Kinzu say that he would starve it for a day, the little brown bear immediately shook his big head, indicating that he would never dare to do it again. Kinzu saw this and nodded with satisfaction. Here, this is for you, eat it quickly. As he said that, he cut another big apple and put it on the plate in front of the big tiger brothers. Regardless of their expressions that had turned into bitter melons again, he took Zumengyo and prepared to go out. Wife, where is the thing you said? After getting in the car, Kinzu remembered that he didn't know where to go. This, don't worry, let me take a look. Scratching his hair, Zumengyo quickly took out a mobile phone and found the website she had seen last night. Yes, I found it. Where is it? Kinzu came over curiously. In Los Angeles? What? Los Angeles? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subieron sinis fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 879. Go see the new house. Looking at Zumengyo, who was holding a mobile phone in her hands and had an innocent expression on her face, Kinzu's forehead was covered with a series of black lines. Well, wife, is this a bit far? It seems a bit far. Zumengyo pursed her lips and lay on her back on the wide leather seat, with disappointment on her face. However, she was not a girl who knew nothing. She knew how far Los Angeles was from Boston, and that was across the entire United States. She didn't think she was that extravagant to go across the entire United States just to raise a few puppies. It's okay, what's the big deal, let's take a plane. Kinzu, who was originally going to buy a few dogs in Boston, immediately changed his mind when he saw the disappointed expression on Zu's face. What did you say? After a pause, Zumengyo wondered if there was something wrong with her ears. I say, let's go by plane. Kinzu smiled and waved his hand to the front, signaling Dale in front to drive, and he took out his cell phone to call Jennifer. No, husband, this is a bit too far. While feeling touched, Zumengyo saw that Kinzu seemed to really plan to go to Los Angeles, and she was a little anxious. Although we have money, we can't waste it like this, right? However, her reaction was still a little slow. When she thought of stopping him, Kinzu had already finished his story and hung up the phone. Covering her forehead, looking at Kinzu beside her, Zumengyo felt a little guilty. Husband, why don't we buy two in Boston? Why do we have to go so far? It's okay, just think of it as us going on a trip. Seeing that the instigator was now distressed, Kinzu was also a little amused and hurriedly hugged the beautiful Zhu to comfort her. But that's too far, it takes a long time to take a plane. Zumengyo still felt a little distressed. Okay, it's nothing. Let's go check out the new house. Kinzu waved his hand, looking nonchalant. New house? What new house? Zumengyo, who was in the midst of self-blame, was instantly diverted by Kinzu's words. Don't you remember? Motioning to Dale in front to drive, Kinzu stretched out his big hand and gently stroked the smooth black hair of the beautiful Zhu, smiling and saying, I told you about it at the beginning, a mansion in Beverly Hills. I seem to have some impression. Nodding, Zumengyo remembered that there seemed to be such a house in the contract at the beginning. However, she looked at Kinzu with some curiosity. New house? So you haven't seen it yet? Yes. Kinzu nodded slightly, and shrugged helplessly. I have been busy since I came to the United States, how can I have time to see it? Listening to Kinzu's words, Zumengyo rolled her eyes charmingly. You don't even have time to look at the new house. Only a rich man like you can say such a thing, right? Although he didn't see the little roll of the eyes of the beautiful lady Zhu, but from her tone, Kinzu knew that it was not a good thing. With a slight turn of his eyes, Kinzu forced a bitter smile on his face and said pretentiously, Wife, how can you be so discouraging? Isn't this going to be used as our new house? What new house? Who wants to marry you? Originally, Zumengyo was pretending to look down on Kinzu, but after hearing this, her body froze immediately, and even her speech became a little stuttering. Kinzu, who was half hugging her, could of course feel the reaction of the beauty in his arms. A smug expression flashed across his face. He pretended to be sad and said, So you don't want to marry me? How could you do this? I have even imagined the scene of our wedding. You disappoint me so much. I do. Seeing that Kinzu seemed really sad, Zumengyo, who was in a state of confusion, blurted out I do. After she finished speaking, she realized what she had said, especially when she saw Kinzu's expression of success, her pretty face turned red with shame. You bad guy, you only know how to bully others. Zumengyo, who felt that even her neck seemed to be getting hot, quickly buried her head in Kinzu's arms, beating Kinzu's chest with her little hands while still mumbling non-stop. I'll beat you to death, you bastard, you only know how to bully me. Ha ha, how can I bear to bully you, I feel sorry for you. Holding the beautiful Zhu's slender waist, Kinzu put his hands together and directly hugged her soft and boneless body into his arms. He lowered his head to smell the fragrance of her hair and murmured, Mingyo, I love you. I will definitely take good care of you in the future. Zhu Mingyo, who was a little embarrassed in Qin Zhu's arms, was still struggling, but after hearing such a sweet sentence, she immediately stopped all her movements. Well, Qin Zhu, I love you too. From the moment you saved me from the gangsters, I fell in love with you. Bravely raising her little head, Zhu Mingyo looked up at her little face that was red as if it was about to drip with water, and her tone was very firm. Qin Zhu heard the words, and his heart was filled with tenderness. He didn't expect that the little girl he had just saved on a whim would be so devoted to him. Although Qin Zhu did not recognize Zhu Mingyo at first, he was wary of this girl with perfect height, appearance and family background approaching him. But since she opened her heart to him on the balcony that day, Qin Zhu had recognized her. Especially when Qin Zhu learned about Zhu Mingyo's family background, he was even more moved. You know, he had nothing at the beginning. Even so, this spoiled young lady would be willing to work as an ordinary employee in a small company for him. If Qin Zhu still thought that this girl, who was almost perfect in character, appearance and family background, was attracted to him for the little money, he would not be just stupid. He could be said to be mentally retarded. Boss, we're here. Although she was reluctant, Dale hesitated for a long time and couldn't help but interrupt the two people who were in love in the back seat. Because Jennifer had called, and the plane to Los Angeles would take off in 10 minutes. Oh, so fast. Qin Zhu came back to his senses and reluctantly let go of the beauty in his arms. He helped her tidy up her messy clothes and said with a smile, "Wife, let's go. It's time to get on the plane." Well, Zhu Mingyo, whose face was still flushed, did not dare to raise her head in front of Dale and Erica. Hey, wife, they are all family members. There is nothing to be shy about. Seeing this, Qin Zhu couldn't help but stretch out his big hand and gently lifted the little head of the beautiful Zhu, lowered his head and gently kissed it. Don't make trouble, let's go quickly. Although she knew that what Qin Zhu said was right, as a somewhat traditional Chinese girl, Zhu Mingyo still couldn't let go. Qin Zhu didn't force her. He pinched her white and tender little hand lovingly and took her to the airport. Chapter 880 Los Angeles. After more than 6 hours of flight, Qin Zhu and his party successfully arrived at the west coast of the United States from the east coast. It's still warm here, wife. If we had known earlier, we would have come here to spend the winter. Qin Zhu felt a little hot and unbearable just after getting off the plane and before leaving the airport, and couldn't help but open his coat. Zhu Mingyo agreed with Qin Zhu's proposal, nodded and said, "Yes, the temperature here in Los Angeles is much higher than Boston." Before Qin Zhu had time to answer, Dale, who was protecting the two of them, suddenly pointed in a direction and said, "Boss, someone is coming to pick us up." Hearing this, Qin Zhu followed the direction of Dale's finger and saw a pickup sign made of plastic board with his name written in bold letters on it. "I didn't notify anyone." Scratching his head, Qin Zhu looked at Zhu Mingyo beside him with some uncertainty. "Wife, do you think we have the same name? It shouldn't be such a coincidence, right?" Holding Qin Zhu's arm with one hand, the beautiful Lady Zhu was a little unsure of this time. "Forget it, let's go over and take a look." After hesitating for a while, Qin Zhu still took the lead and walked over. Because he suddenly thought of something. When he came here, it was Jennifer who booked the flight. When Qin Zhu got closer, he found that the person holding the pickup sign with his name on it was a white old man in a black tuxedo who looked to be around 50 years old. Before Qin Zhu could speak, the white old man who looked like a noble butler on TV had already put down the airport pickup sign in his hand, stepped forward, and said in a very respectful tone, "Mr. Clean, welcome to your arrival. I'm Ivan Anderson, the butler of the villa." Hello. After looking at Zhu Mingyo, Qin Zhu stretched out his hand to shake hands with Anderson, and said with a smile, "Mr. Anderson, what are you doing?" The white old man stretched out his hand to gesture, and explained respectfully, "Mr. Clean, Miss Jennifer knows that you were coming today, so she asked me to pick you up to see the villa." Nodding, Qin Zhu was relieved, and accompanied by Dale and others, he followed Anderson to the outside of the airport. After leaving the airport, an extended version of Rolls-Royce slowly drove in from a distance and stopped in front of the few people. "Mr. Clean, please get in the car." Helping Qin Zhu to open the car door, Anderson made a gentlemanly gesture of invitation. Touching his nose, Qin Zhu was a little uncomfortable with the old housekeeper's attentive attitude. After pulling Zhu Mingyo into the car, Qin Zhu looked at the luxurious decoration inside the car and asked curiously, "Anderson, what is this car?" Anderson, who was sitting in the front seat and talking to the driver, turned his head and introduced with a smile, Mr. Clean, this Rolls-Royce super long version was bought by the previous owner of the villa at an auction a few years ago. This is the first time it has been driven out. Rolls-Royce super long version. President version. Kinzu didn't react after hearing this, but Zumengyo shouted in surprise. Wife, what is the president version? Kinzu moved his curious eyes back from the front and looked at the beauty beside him, waiting for her explanation. Anderson smiled and said nothing more when he saw this, and turned his head to signal the driver to drive. I have also heard people talking about this extended version of Rolls-Royce, which is specially produced for the royal family or dignitaries of various countries, so it is also called the Head of State Edition. Smoothing the messy hair beside her ears, Zumengyo looked at the decoration inside the car and said curiously, but now this kind of car has been discontinued for a long time, and there are only a few in the world. I didn't expect you to still have it. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly. Not to mention Zumengyo, even he himself didn't expect it. However, although he knew the origin of this car, Kinzu didn't feel anything special when sitting on it. Well, it was just more stable than his own Night the 15th. Soon, after turning a few corners on the streets of Los Angeles, this extended version of Rolls-Royce entered a busy street. Anderson, is this the Avenue of Stars? Kinzu, who was concentrating on looking out the window, suddenly asked Anderson in front of him excitedly. Yes, Mr. Clean, this is the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Seeing that Kinzu seemed to be interested in this place, Anderson asked the driver to slow down the car and introduced it to Kinzu with a smile. However, after the initial novelty period, Kinzu felt a little bored. Looking around, there was only a street with 5 pointed stars. There's nothing fun here. I don't understand why so many people like it. Retracting his gaze, Kinzu shrugged helplessly, indicating that he had no interest in it. Ha, there's nothing here. It's just for those celebrity fans to take photos. After taking a few glances, Zumengyo retracted her gaze. She had been here before and never thought there was anything fun here. Okay, let's go back quickly. After waving his hand and signaling to speed up the car, Kinzu suddenly remembered something, touched his stomach, and asked, by the way, Anderson, is there a chef in the villa? If not, let's eat something before going back. Yes, Mr. Clean, what do you want to eat? I'll ask them to prepare it. Taking out his mobile phone, Anderson looked at Kinzu, waiting for his instructions. Wife, what do you want to eat? Touching his somewhat rebellious stomach, Kinzu muttered helplessly. These foreigners are they don't even provide working meals on the plane. Although it's not delicious, it's much better than those snacks. It would have been better if she didn't say it. After Kinzu said this, Zumengyo also felt a little hungry. But after thinking about it, she still shook her head. Forget it, let them make something casually, I don't have anything I want to eat. Nodding, Kinzu waved to Anderson in front of him. Just do as Madam said, just make some simple meals. Oh, and don't forget the steak. Okay, I understand. After taking a small notebook to write down Kinzu's request, Anderson stretched out the front and rear fenders and started making a phone call. What's the madam? It's like the landlords in the past. Seeing that there were only a few of them, Zumengyo rolled her eyes at Kinzu, somewhat disagreeing with what he had just said. What's the big deal? That's how we should call each other. Pretending to be helpless, Kinzu shrugged and said with a smile, Wife, do you want them to call you young madam? This really makes you a landlord. Go away. Rolling her eyes, the beautiful Zhu stopped talking to him and lay back on the seat with her head raised and closed her eyes to rest. Chapter 881 Beverly Hills. The villa is located in Los Angeles, the United States. Beverly Hills, located on the Pacific coast and at the foot of Beverly Hills, has the title of the most prestigious residential area in the world and is known as the representative and symbol of wealth and fame. As a dream place in the minds of the world's rich, as the most famous city in Los Angeles, it not only has the world's most upscale commercial streets, but also gathers many luxury houses of Hollywood movie stars. For example, Hollywood actress Scarlett Johansson, Michael Jackson, Brad Pitt, O'Neill, Clark Grace Moretz, the owner of Playboy magazine, Emma Roberts and many other celebrities all own or have owned villas here. When the extended version of Rolls-Royce stopped steadily in front of a large oval gate, it seemed that it had not yet recovered from this unparalleled beauty. Okay, husband, we're almost there. Seeing that Kinzu was a little dazed, Zumengyo stretched out her jade hand and gently pushed him, reminding him in a low voice. Born into a wealthy family in China, she has a different experience from Kinzu, a local tycoon who changed his career. For example, now, although she also thinks this place is good, it does not surprise her too much. Well, I know. Kinzu came back to his senses, stretched his waist, and said with some emotion, "If we had known earlier, we would have come here to spend the winter. We are almost freezing to death in Boston." Poochie, Kinzu's lazy look made Zoom and Gyo laugh. "Is it that serious? Why don't I feel how cold it is? You have been in the north since you were a child, of course you don't think it's a big deal." Kinzu shrugged helplessly. "Haven't you heard a saying?" "What saying?" "You're in that cold night in the north and it is spring all year round, and I'm in that bright sun in the south and it is snowing heavily." As the oval iron gate slowly opened, the extended version of Rolls-Royce drove in directly. After driving along a main road lined with thorns for about a few minutes, the car stopped in front of a building with a snow-white oval roof. "Mr. Clean, we're here." Before Dale and Erica could react, Anderson had already gotten out of the car and stretched out his hand to help Kinzu open the door. "Anderson, how big is this place?" After getting out of the car, Kinzu looked around and couldn't help asking in amazement. "Mr. Clean, the building area of this manor is 68,000 square feet, and the total area is about 6 acres. TSK, 6 acres, more than 24,200 square meters. After a quick calculation, Kinzu shook his head with some sighs. Indeed, this place can no longer be called a villa, it should be called a manor. Although the villa in his ranch is much larger than this one, according to his own estimation, the price there is not even half as high as here. What place is this? This is Beverly Hills. There is no need to go there to compare, just go out and ask, any American can tell you which one to choose. Mr. Clean, let's go in first. Anderson waved to the servants who came to meet him and gestured to the front respectfully. Kinzu nodded, touched his belly, and said nothing. He followed with Zoom and Gyo and Dale. After entering the living room and sitting down on the French-style fabric sofa, Kinzu looked around and asked casually, "Anderson, how many people are there in the manor now?" Hearing Kinzu's words, Anderson first gave a few instructions to a Filipino maid, then came to the sofa, crossed his hands in front of him, and replied respectfully, "Mr. Clean, now the whole manor, including me, has 6 employees, including a gardener, a chef, a driver and security guard, and 2 Filipino maids." Kinzu nodded slightly and said nothing, but sipped the coffee handed over by the Filipino maid. Soon, a short and fat white man in a white coat came over quickly, pushing a silver dining cart. After seeing the newcomer, Anderson introduced him to Kinzu in a low voice. "Mr. Clean, this is the chef of our manor, Jackson Green." Nodding, Kinzu looked at this neatly dressed white man with a chef's hat on his head, and couldn't help but feel a little favorable. Because Kinzu could see that the chef's uniform Green was wearing was not the brand new one. In other words, it was not because he came that he wore it specially for him to see, but it proved that he was like this at ordinary times. "Sir, madam, lunch is ready." When he came to the two of them, with the help of the Filipino maid, the food was placed on the table. Then, the blonde and blue-eyed white chef Green came to Kinzu and bowed to make a gesture of invitation. Smelling that fragrance floating in the air, Kinzu took a deep breath, smiled at him and thanked him, and impatiently pulled Zoom and Gyo to the restaurant. "Don't worry, no one is going to snatch it from you." Being pulled by Kinzu, Zoom and Gyo's steps unconsciously slowed down a little, which made the beautiful Zhu, who always claimed to be a lady, a little embarrassed. "What are you afraid of? It's your own home, not outside." Kinzu didn't care about the reserve of the beautiful lady Zhu. She needed to disguise herself outside, but couldn't she release her nature at home? Rolling her eyes, Zoom and Gyo decided not to insist, and let Kinzu pull her, jogging all the way to the restaurant. Anderson and the white chef behind her were a little stunned. It was not the first time for them to serve the rich, but when had they seen such a rich man who was so casual? However, the reactions of the two were somewhat different. As an old butler who had received British butler education since childhood, Anderson smiled helplessly and felt that the new boss might be difficult to serve. For a chef, the white chef Green was very excited that the food he cooked could be treated like this by his boss. "Hey, Anderson, see, my Green's cooking skills are very popular with the new boss." "Ahem, Green, you should go back." Anderson coughed twice and reminded her unhappily. "Why are you in such a hurry?" "I'm just concerned about whether the boss is satisfied with the meal." Although Green said this, he turned around and walked out. As a chef, he really couldn't stay in the main building for too long without the boss's order. Seeing this, Anderson shook his head helplessly. He was not optimistic about the future of his old friend. Because the new boss was Chinese. Chapter 882. The person who sent the dog turned out to be a billionaire. After having afternoon tea, which was considered lunch, Qinzhu took Zhu Wenguo to the lawn outside the manor to bask in the sun. Honey, when are we going to see the puppies? Zhu Wenguo lazily leaned in Qinzhu's arms, holding her phone in one hand and fiddling with her hair with the other. Are we going now? Qinzhu opened his eyes and said reluctantly, why don't we take a day off before going? This, Zhu Wenguo pouted. Although she was already a little impatient, she didn't want to move when she felt the warm feeling brought by the sun shining on her body. Okay, let's talk about it tomorrow. Changing her position to make herself more comfortable, Zhu Wenguo touched her belly and muttered, honey, what level are the chefs here? How do they make the food so delicious? I don't know. Shaking his head, Qinzhu touched his bloated belly and said with a smile, wife, the most important thing is that you are hungry, so of course you want to eat everything quickly. Really? Zhu Wenguo raised her head with some suspicion. It must be. Qinzhu answered firmly. Okay, I'll trust you for once. Zhu Wenguo pouted and lay back again, resting her head on Qinzhu's thigh. Sitting up, stroking her soft black hair, Qinzhu smiled and asked, wife, where does the person who wants to give the dog life? Los Angeles is so big, he wouldn't have written the address, right? How is that possible? Giving Qinzhu a blank look, the beautiful Zhu picked up her phone, found the information of the person on Twitter, and read it carefully again. What's wrong? Qinzhu didn't hear any movement for a long time, and couldn't help but look down, only to find that Zhu Wenguo's expression was a little strange. Hey, she doesn't seem to be too far away from us. After hesitating for a moment, Zhu Wenguo looked at the phone again with some hesitation, not sure if she had seen it wrong. Oh? Let me see where it is. Qinzhu took the phone with a smile, looked at the location on it, and was stunned. Hey, this seems to be nearby. He opened the map with some uncertainty, looked at the location on it, and scratched his head, feeling a little confused. What a joke. A billionaire, giving away puppies online. Is it a prank? Qinzhu handed the phone to Zhu Wenguo and speculated with some suspicion. It shouldn't be. Although she said it wouldn't happen, she actually didn't hold any hope in her heart. With a frustrated sigh, Zhu Wenguo raised her head and looked at Qinzhu. It's all my fault. I made you run so far. Silly, what are you talking about? Qinzhu lowered his head and pecked her pink lips lightly, and said with a smile, we came here mainly to look at houses. Adopting a puppy is secondary. Besides, if there is no better place, we can just go around Los Angeles. Well, that's good. Zhu Wenguo nodded her head, a bright smile appeared on her face, and she leaned closer to Qinzhu. Ding-ling-ling, just as the two of them were basking in the afternoon sun and lazily wanting to sleep, a pleasant cell phone ringtone suddenly rang. Wife, yours. Reaching out to grope for his cell phone, but found that there was no movement, Qinzhu reminded casually without opening his eyes. Mine? Zhu Wenguo, who was in happiness, took the phone lazily. After seeing the caller ID clearly, the beautiful Zhu exclaimed in surprise. Why is it her? What's wrong? Who is it? Qinzhu sat up curiously. It's the one who said on Twitter that he would send Alaska. Zhu Wenguo answered the phone. She also wanted to ask if this guy was joking with her. After a moment, Zhu Wenguo put down the phone and said with a strange expression, honey, she said she lives nearby. No. 65 Beverly Hills. Really live here? Touching his nose, Qinzhu felt a little incredible. Could it be that the billionaire's at board? We are no. 86 here. If it's no. 65, it should be over there, right? Comparing the road signs he saw when he came here, Qinzhu stretched out his hand and pointed to the left of the manor. Then let's go and take a look now. Looking up at the big sun above his head, Zhu Wenguo asked tentatively. Okay, it's not far anyway. Qinzhu smiled and nodded. Anyway, there is nothing to do now. Although the distance is not far, that is for driving. If you don't drive, it's really a dead horse. Waving to Anderson who was not far away, Qinzhu asked while helping Zhu Wenguo to sort out her clothes. Anderson, how many cars do we have in the garage? Prepare one for us to go out. This, Anderson said with some embarrassment. Mr. Clean, there is only one Rolls-Royce limousine in the manor at present. Qinzhu looked at him in surprise. Just this one? Yes, just this one. Nodding affirmatively, Anderson felt helpless. Don't you know your own things? What should I do? Just drive this one over. Looking at Zhu Mengyo, Qinzhu's smile was a little strange. How much does it cost to drive a limousine to pick up a puppy? This is the only way. I can't just walk over there, right? Holding her forehead, the beautiful Zhu was also a little amused. However, as she said, she can only drive this car now. It's such a long distance, I can't just walk over there, right? However, just as the two are walking slowly on the road leading to the main building of the villa, Qinzhu suddenly said, "Wife, why don't we buy a commuter car before we go? Don't you think it's troublesome?" Looking at Qinzhu with some surprise, Zhu Mengyo reached out and touched his forehead, muttering, "You don't have a fever, why are you talking nonsense? What are you talking about?" Grabbing the naughty little hand, putting it to his mouth and kissing it hard, Qinzhu smiled and said, "Wife, I'm afraid that people will misunderstand. It will be bad if people scold us for showing off our wealth. How is it possible?" After struggling twice and failing to break free, Zhu Mengyo stopped struggling and let Qinzhu pinch her little hand. She smiled and shook her head. "Don't you think about what kind of people live here? Will they think that you are showing off your wealth by driving a limousine?" "That's true." Qinzhu touched his nose a little embarrassedly. "So, people definitely won't think so. Maybe they think it's someone's driver who drove his boss's car out to show off." In the blink of an eye, it's New Year's Eve, but Liun is still typing bigly. Here, Liun wishes all new and old book friends a Happy New Year, and by the way, asks for rewards, subscriptions, and various requests. Chapter 883 Scarlett Johansson. The warm sunshine of the winter afternoon spreads freely in the tree-lined villas of Beverly Hills, making the passing tourists feel a breath of spring. At the foot of the mountain, there is a French mansion that is hidden in the green mountains and waters and decorated quite luxuriously. A blonde and blue-eyed stunning beauty is lying lazily on the lawn at this moment, staring at the little guys in front of her in a daze. "Why haven't you come yet?" The blonde beauty, who is wearing a mink coat and has a very elegant temperament, raised her wrist to check the time, feeling a little depressed. The Alaskan dog at home who makes people worry, has been bullied at some point, and actually gave birth to a litter of babies a few days ago. Bang! Thinking of this, the woman couldn't help but slap the armrest of the recline hard, scaring a chubby Alaskan dog not far away, and it suddenly retracted its head. "You still have the nerve to eat it." Who did it?" Looking at the piece of fruit next to Alaska's mouth, the blonde beauty seemed to be a little irritated. She walked up to pull its ears and scolded loudly. "Woo, woo," Alaska whimpered a little aggrievedly when being pulled by the owner's ears. "How could this be? I'm also a pregnant woman now, okay?" The woman, who was originally very angry, felt a little bit reluctant when she saw the pitiful look of the dog. "Forget it, you guy, eat it." Helplessly standing up, the woman returned to the recliner and sat down again. Looking at the little guys snuggling together, she began to feel depressed again. "You said you want to give birth, so I can raise you too. It's nothing to give birth to one. It's just right for me to keep you company. But you have a big litter now. How can I raise them all?" It's not that she can't afford to raise them. She can afford to live in Beverly Hills. Not to mention a few puppies, even if there are thousands of them, she won't have any pressure to raise them. But there is no need. She kept 2 pets to accompany her, and that was to relieve stress after work. But if she kept such a large group of pets, she would not be able to bear it when she saw the chaos every time she came home from get off work. Maybe she would not be able to relieve the stress, and she would end up with schizophrenia. Beep! At this moment, 2 hurried car horns sounded outside the door. "Have they come in?" Frowning her pretty eyebrows, the blonde beauty stood up, straightened her clothes, and walked towards the villa. "Miss, there are 2 people outside. Did you say you made an appointment with them?" Before she entered the villa, a Filipino maid ran over in a hurry. "Well, let them in." After waving her hand and signaling the Filipino maid to go down and notify them, the blonde beauty simply did not enter the villa, but stood at the door and waited. She was actually a little curious about the 2 strangers she was about to meet. Because they had talked on the phone before, she knew that the 2 strangers had flown directly from Boston. This alone dispelled the woman's doubts about whether they liked dogs. Moreover, people who flew from Boston to Los Angeles for a few dogs certainly did not do so to save money on buying pets, so the woman was not worried that they would be pet dealers. The above 2 points are the reason why the woman was so looking forward to the 2 strangers. She even took the initiative to call them after they arrived. In her heart, although she had made up her mind to send the dogs away, she did not want these little guys to be abused in the future. The woman who was thinking about things heard a car sound coming from the front and looked up. It doesn't matter if you don't look, but once you look, the woman's seductive little mouth can't close. Before she came to her senses, a cry of surprise suddenly rang in her ears. You're Johansson. Scarlett Johansson. The two people who just got off the car looked at the noble lady in front of them who was wearing a mink coat and looked very elegant, and a hint of surprise appeared on their faces. Hello, I'm Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett took back her astonished look and looked deeply at the Chinese couple in front of her. The surprise in her heart could not be described in words. Driving an extended version of Rolls-Royce, a presidential-level luxury car that has been discontinued, to pick up their pets, should they be called spendthrifts or showing off their wealth? Qin Zhu and Zhu Mengyo didn't know that the famous Hollywood actress in front of them was already scolding them for showing off their wealth. After looking at each other, both Qin Zhu and Zhu Mengyo are speechless. The person standing in front of them was actually Scarlett, a top Hollywood actress. The surprise and curiosity in their hearts were not much less than Scarlett when she saw them driving a presidential-level luxury car. Of course, the reason for their surprise was not that they liked this female star so much. This kind of surprise was purely a bit of surprise when they saw the person on the big screen suddenly appear in front of them without any preparation. This is Miss Yu, right? Let's go in and talk. After looking at Qin Zhu and the others, Scarlett finally locked her eyes on Zhu Mengyo and smiled and made a gesture of invitation. Seeing Zhu Mengyo's gaze, Qin Zhu nodded gently, waved to Dale and the others to wait outside, and followed Scarlett into the villa. After the few people came to the open living room and sat down, they took the coffee brought by the Filipino maid and chatted while looking at the scenery outside. After a brief introduction, Scarlett pointed to the lawn in the yard where several little Alaskans were snuggling and playing, and asked with a hint of uncertainty in her tone, "Miss Yu, Mr. Clean, I wonder what your jobs are. Do you have time to accompany these little guys?" Before the few people met, she always thought that this kind of loving family with a comfortable living condition was the best place for these little guys. However, when she saw the head of state-level Rolls-Royce, she became a little uncertain. Such a rich person must be very busy at work. Do they really have time to take good care of these little guys? As if he understood Scarlett's worries, Qin Zhu put down the coffee cup in his hand, smiled, crossed his hands and clasped them together, and introduced. Ms. Scarlett, you can rest assured about this, because I work on a farm and ranch. I usually stay on the ranch and have plenty of time to accompany the little guys. Ranch? Scarlett looked at the two in surprise. This time she was really stunned. She had just thought of countless industries, but she never thought that the two would actually work in agriculture and animal husbandry. Could it be that farming and herding cattle can make so much money now? Chapter 884. The difference between Alaska and Alaskan pigs. Yes, our main business is to run a ranch. Qin Zhu nodded, and he did not feel inferior because his main business was to be a farmer. Or rather, he did not think that farmers were inferior to others. After all, no matter what you do, as long as you have money, it's fine. In today's society, people laugh at the poor but not at prostitution, especially in capitalist countries. This phenomenon is even more obvious. Then, Scarlett seemed to have thought of something and asked hesitantly, "Clean, you won't use them as working dogs, will you?" Qin Zhu looked at Zhu Mengyo with a bit of a smile and shook his head gently. "Miss Scarlett, do you think someone would go to such great lengths for a few working dogs?" Hearing what Qin Zhu said, Scarlett felt a little embarrassed, and two blushes rose on her fair face. Seeing this, Qin Zhu sighed in his heart. It is said that foreigners have coarse paws and look rough and thick-skinned, not delicate at all. But how come the skin of the women he knows looks so delicate? In that case, I'm relieved to leave them to you. Stared at by Qin Zhu's somewhat burning eyes, Scarlett turned around awkwardly, cast her eyes on Zhu Mengyo, and said with a smile, "Zhu, let me take you to see them, they are really very cute little guys." Zhu Mengyo didn't notice the gaze of the man next to her. After she came in, her attention was always attracted by the little guys in the yard, and she was reluctant to leave. Although she felt that the little guys in front of her were not as cute as the Alaskan pigs in the video. But she firmly believed that she could successfully cultivate a few authentic Alaskan pigs. But, if Scarlett knew what the beautiful Zhu was thinking, would she still give these poor Alaskans to her? That would be a problem. Fortunately, the beautiful Zhu was in a very good state, and the look in her eyes when she looked at the little guys was very doting, which also made Scarlett, who was secretly observing, completely relieved. "Zhu, I hope you can treat them well. I will go to see them when I have time." Before getting in the car, Scarlett looked at the little guys placed on the seat and almost cried. Although she couldn't keep these little guys, she loved them very much. Now that she suddenly gave them away, she was really reluctant to give them up. Scarlet, don't worry, I will definitely treat them well. Glancing at the thin bodies of the little guys, Zumengyo showed a devilish smile at the corner of her mouth. It's just a pity that Scarlet, who was paying attention to the little Alaska, didn't find anything unusual. Okay, Miss Scarlet. Looking at the graceful Hollywood top actress in front of him, Kinzu smiled and gestured. Thank you very much for your gift. If there is a chance, we will treat you to dinner again. After saying goodbye to Scarlet, who was reluctant to leave, Kinzu gestured to Dale to drive, and the group drove back to Villa 86 Beverly. A moment later, when this pure black extended Rolls-Royce just arrived at the door of the villa and had not yet stopped, Zumengyo was already a little impatient. Honey, what do you think we should feed the puppies? Dog food. Looking at the expectant eyes of the beautiful Zhu, Kinzu nodded with a bit of a smile. This should be okay, right? Then hurry up, let's prepare food for them. With a cheer, the beautiful Zhu held the two little Alaskans, motioned Kinzu to follow her, and walked quickly towards the villa. Shaking his head, Kinzu did not expect that the beautiful Zhu was so playful. He followed behind with the remaining two Alaskans, and shouted as he walked. Wife, why are you walking so fast? Wait for me. Stopping, Zumengyo rolled her eyes at Kinzu, who was a little hesitant behind her, and muttered. Hurry up, what if the little guys are hungry? Kinzu thought to himself that they had just eaten before coming here, how could they be hungry? However, seeing the excited look in the eyes of the beautiful lady Zhu, he said nothing. Forget it, let her be happy. When the two walked into the villa, Zumengyo directly put the puppy on the sofa and waved her hand. Husband, go and make a nest for these guys. We can't let them stay here, right? Hearing this, Kinzu couldn't help but roll his eyes. There are no tools here. You want me to make a doghouse for you? Waving his hand and calling the old housekeeper Anderson over, Kinzu smiled and ordered. Anderson, ask someone to go to the pet store to buy a house for the puppies. Don't buy a big one. Okay, sir, I got it. When Anderson took out a small notebook to write it down, just when he was about to go out and ask someone to buy it, he was stopped by King Xu. Oh, Anderson, remember to buy some dog food. I want the best kind for puppies. Hearing this, Anderson nodded, took a pen and wrote it down, then asked, Sir, is there anything else you need to buy? After thinking carefully for a while, Kinzu discussed it with the beautiful lady Zhu again, and waved his hand. No more, go quickly, let them move faster. Okay, sir, I got it. After bowing, Anderson turned around and went out. As for who he would arrange to buy it, Kinzu didn't care at all. Honey, how long do you think it will take for them to evolve? Lying on the sofa, the beautiful lady Zhu looked at a few timid Alaskans, with a little entanglement in her expression. What's wrong? Kinzu looked at her curiously. Tell me, when will they grow fat? Somewhat dissatisfied with Kinzu's answer, Zumengyo stretched out her little hand to grab Kinzu's big hand, shaking it left and right and acting coquettishly. Well, let me think about it. Kinzu scratched his hair hard. How could he explain such a thing clearly? However, seeing that the beautiful Zhu was looking at him with pitiful eyes, Kinzu had to pretend to think seriously for a while, and then he made up a time and said, Probably 2 months, they will grow fat in 2 months. Oh, so that's it. Nodding, Zumengyo let go of her hand, but the expression on her face became more tangled. Wife, what's the matter, what are you thinking about? Kinzu sat on the sofa with some worry, picked up the beautiful Zhu's little head and let her rest it on his thigh. Nestled in Kinzu's arms obediently, Zumengyo looked at the little Alaskan who was huddled up in fear next to her, and said with a little entanglement, Husband, what do you think, should we get Alaskan pigs, or just Alaskan? I think they are both so cute. ... Chapter 885. Spiritual liquid shows its power again. Anderson was very efficient. Although it was already evening, he still managed to get everything done within an hour. Mr. Clean, do you think this is okay? After motioning the black man who was also that driver and security guard to move a rectangular doghouse in, Anderson came to the two of them and asked respectfully. Kinzu heard this, looked at the wooden box in front of him that was painted snow white and had a cartoon pattern on it, and nodded with a smile. Very good, thank you for your trouble, Anderson. Mr. Keen is too polite. These are what we should do. Anderson bowed, looked around, pointed to a corner and asked, How about putting this over there? Okay, put it there. Kinzu waved his hand, and he had no objection to this. Okay, put it here. After motioning the black man to move the doghouse over, Anderson brought in a few bags of dog food from outside and put them aside, then bent down and left. This housekeeper is good, but a little too rigid. Shaking his head, Kinzu looked at Zhu Mengyo with some emotion, and said with a smile, "It's always so rigid, which makes me a little uncomfortable." "What's the matter?" Zhu Mengyo shrugged indifferently, while sending the puppies to the nest, and did not forget to turn around and tease. "This is just a new style housekeeper trained by the British butler school. If you have seen those real old British butlers, you won't think they're rigid. Well, it seems that I am not destined to enjoy it." With a wry smile and touching his nose, Kinzu watched Zhu Mengyo send the puppies in, and did not step forward to help, but took out his mobile phone to call Jennifer. After all, this girl helped him arrange everything in an orderly manner, and it would be unreasonable not to praise her a few words. Jennifer, who received Kinzu's call, had already taken out paper and pen, ready to meet the barrage of arrangements, but she was stunned after picking up the phone. After listening for a long time, Jennifer finally came back to her senses. She seemed to have thought of something and said with some stammering, "Boss, I have a boyfriend." The smile on his face froze. Kinzu, who was searching for nice words to express his gratitude, almost dropped the phone in his hand. "You have a boyfriend? What does that have to do with me?" "Well, Jennifer, don't get me wrong. I also have a girlfriend." Kinzu smiled and looked at Zhu Mengyo not far away. He lowered his voice, fearing that she would misunderstand something. Then, Jennifer on the other side of the phone heard the words, her face flushed, and she muttered very aggrievedly, "Boss, that's even worse. I don't want to be someone's lover." Hearing the aggrieved little voice on the other end of the phone, Kinzu looked up at the sky and exhaled deeply. Only then did he hold back the Chinese curse that was about to come out of his mouth. What on earth is this girl thinking? "Jennifer, did you arrange the servants and housekeepers for this villa?" Rubbing his head with a headache, Kinzu quickly changed the subject. He felt that if he continued to talk, he would be choked to death by her. On the other side of the phone, Jennifer, hearing that this big pervert did not continue to pester her, also hurriedly replied, Yes, boss, this was also that contract you signed in person at the beginning." "The contract I signed?" Touching his nose, Kinzu was no longer angry, but now he was a little confused. "When did I sign this contract? Why don't I know?" "You signed it, that's right." Nodding affirmatively, as if she had thought of something, Jennifer also forgot her embarrassment just now, and a smug smile hung on the corner of her mouth. "This is for you to sign together with the original transfer contract. Their salary is paid annually, and it will be automatically transferred to the other party's company at the beginning of each year." After Jennifer said this, Kinzu lost his temper immediately, and could only sigh helplessly. "You are so damn cunning. Come to think of it, no one would take a close look at the contract after getting this unexpected surprise." Although he hired a lawyer, these additional terms did not infringe on his own interests, so Suruli did not elaborate on this at the time. Besides, which rich family doesn't have a few servants? This problem is not a big deal at all. "Boss, you're wronging us. Aren't we here to provide you with better service?" With a sly smile, Jennifer knew that Kinzu would not be really angry, so even if she heard Kinzu's complaints, she simply pretended not to hear them. "Really? Better service?" He rolled his eyes, thinking of Jennifer's performance just now, and couldn't help but tease in. "Does it include finding a lover?" Now it was Jennifer's turn to be speechless. She held the phone in her hand, half leaning on the bed, and didn't know how to react. Kinzu didn't watch her reaction. After he finished speaking, he hung up the phone directly, muttering to himself, "Even if you really introduce me to a lover, I dare not accept it." That's right, he has already begun to worry about his complicated emotional life. There is no way. The more he gets along with the beautiful Zhu, the more Kinzu wants to live like this for the rest of his life. He can't remember at all that he is actually a guy with overflowing emotions. "Husband, come quickly, there is a little guy here who won't eat." Kinzu, who was entangled in his future emotional life, was awakened by the anxious voice of Zhu Mengyo not far away. "Wife, what's wrong?" Kinzu walked up quickly and looked at Zhu Mengyo, who looked worried. He couldn't help but worry. "Look, I feed them dog food, but these guys won't eat it." Pinching her black and smooth hair, Zhu Mengyo pointed at the little guy curled up in the corner, with an anxious expression on her face. Kinzu leaned over and looked at him, also at a loss. If you say someone doesn't want to eat, he can still force him to finish the food. But facing a few little guys who don't know anything, he is not a veterinarian, what does he know? However, he thought about it and came up with an idea. Come on, come here, I'll try. As he said that, Kinzu asked Zumengyo to retreat to the side, and he moved to the side of the cage. While the beautiful Zhu behind him was not paying attention, Kinzu secretly mixed a drop of spiritual liquid and quietly dripped it into the bowl of dog food that was left. What's going on? Being blocked by Kinzu and unable to see the situation inside, Zumengyo became more anxious. Seeing that Kinzu had not moved for a long time, she couldn't help but ask worriedly from behind. It's okay, look, it has started eating. Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, protected the dog food bowl while pushing the little guys aside, feeling so sad that he wanted to cry but had no tears. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 886. Can I get treatment now? It turned out that Kinzu had overlooked one thing. The spiritual liquid was not only attractive to the little guy who didn't eat, but also to the other little guys who were already very active. So, at the moment when the spiritual liquid dripped, no matter whether it was the little guy who was playing or the little guy who was huddled in the corner, they stood up instantly and rushed straight to the dog food bowl. However, how could such a small amount of dog food be enough for those guys? So Kinzu picked up the dog food bowl at once. But this time, he had poked a hornet's nest. Several little guys began to roar around him, and for a while, the childish barking sound rang in the villa. Husband, tell me the truth, what did you feed them? On the large French-style sofa in the living room, Zumengyo sat on Kinzu's thighs with a fierce expression on her face. This, touching his nose, Kinzu was a little speechless, his eyes kept rolling around, thinking about how to explain. Look into my eyes, don't lie to me. Reaching out and pinching Kinzu's slightly stubbled old face, Zumengyo pouted her lips, shaking her hands left and right, her eyes revealing an excitement like discovering a new world. Seeing this, Kinzu could only spread his hands helplessly and took the beautiful Zhu off his body. Okay, wait a minute, I'll pour it out for you to see. Watching Kinzu go to find something, Zumengyo sat on the sofa alone, with a satisfied smile on her face when she was about to get something she had been looking forward to for a long time. She always felt that Kinzu was hiding something from her, whether it was the husky and jaguar at home, or the harpy eagle known as the king of the sky, they all obeyed him. Look at this. While she was thinking, Kinzu's voice suddenly rang in her ears. When Zumengyo came to her senses, she saw a disposable cup in front of her. This is not the most important thing, the most important thing is, there is a drop of emerald green water in the cup. What is this? Looking at Kinzu stupidly, Zumengyo was a little confused. What is this? Why are you showing me a drop of dyed water? Potion. Kinzu looked at Zumengyo seriously and introduced in an unquestionable tone. Didn't I tell you last time? I got a formula, and this is the potion made from that formula. Is this the potion? Pinching the ends of her hair, Zumengyo felt confused. Did you tell me there was such a potion? However, seeing that Kinzu's expression didn't seem to be joking, Zumengyo had to put this matter aside for the time being. Because, what she cares about most now is what this potion does. Husband, tell me quickly, what is this potion used for? Come here first. Kinzu motioned Zumengyo to come with him. After Zumengyo stood up from the sofa with a puzzled look on her face, Kinzu took the cup of spiritual liquid and went to get some dog food. Look, pour this in. Under Zumengyo's fixed gaze, Kinzu poured the emerald green water drop directly onto the dog food. As if it had life, the emerald green water drop jumped twice when it fell into the basin. Then, in Zumengyo's stunned expression, the emerald green water drop turned into even finer drops of water, and completely merged with the dog food. Let's not talk about what the effect of this potion is, just this magical scene has made Zumengyo completely Spartan. Don't worry, there's more magic to come. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu hadn't finished speaking when a crisp barking sound once again resounded throughout the villa. Husband, what on earth is this? Is it a drug specifically for animals? Looking at the few little Alaskans lying in the doghouse, Zumengyo couldn't connect these cute guys with the guys who were jumping and chasing them all the way just now. Wife, what are you thinking about? How could it be drugs? Kinzu, who was lying on the sofa, was a little amused and touched Zumengyo's head with his hand, with a look of relief. He finally got through today's level. If it wasn't for the shock of the beautiful Zhu, when she reacted and asked him where the medicine was, today's level would not be easy. If it's not drugs, then what is it? Zhu Mengyo curled her lips and showed a suspicious expression, saying, "Didn't you see how they look? What's the difference between them and those drug addicts? The difference is huge." Waving his hand, Qin Zhu sat up and explained seriously, "Wife, my medicine is made with many Chinese herbs. It has a strong healing effect on both humans and animals." "Really?" "Absolutely true." Seeing Qin Zhu's serious expression, Zhu Mengyo stared at the little Alaska in the cage carefully for a while, and then nodded. Indeed, this guy is in a very normal state, but Qin Zhu's heart skipped a beat. Did this girl find out something? Although he felt a little nervous, Qin Zhu pretended to be calm and asked with a smile, "But what?" Zhu Mengyo didn't say anything, but stood up silently, sat down on the sofa, and stared at Qin Zhu with her beautiful eyes wide open. "Wife, what's wrong?" Being stared at by Zhu Mengyo like this, Qin Zhu felt a little nervous. His mind was turning around quickly, thinking about where he had revealed his flaws. "Did you really treat Erica's illness?" Zhu Mengyo seemed a little excited, and her voice trembled when she spoke. "Huh? What did you say?" Qin Zhu didn't react for a while, blinked, and asked again with some uncertainty. "I said, did you really treat Erica's illness?" This time, Zhu Mengyo's voice was no longer trembling, but became a little heavier, and the expression on her face finally changed, becoming very expectant. "Yes, didn't I tell you? I was the one who treated him." Hearing this, Qin Zhu breathed a sigh of relief and seemed to have guessed what Zhu Mengyo wanted to say. "Wife, I've always told you that your illness is nothing. I can definitely cure you." "Really?" Staring at Qin Zhu without blinking, Zhu Mengyo's voice seemed to float from the sky. She patted her chest with her hand, and a confident expression appeared on her face. "Wife, you have to believe me. When have I ever lied to you? Then you can cure me now, okay? Thank you for the 388 book coins reward from We Wait for Happiness for a Lifetime, and thank you for the reward support from Hank Sauzeron, 10 years old worm, and Yuzen Nonying. Happy New Year." Chapter 887 Still no use. No. Looking at Qin Zhu's difficult expression, Zhu Mengyo's eyes flashed with disappointment and loneliness. "It's not that I can't, it's just," scratching his head, Qin Zhu felt helpless. He also wanted to treat it now, but after hesitating for a while, he still said, "Wife, it's not that I don't want to treat you now, but this medicine has a side effect." "What side effect?" Looking up in surprise, Zhu Mengyo's eyes regained some spirit. For her, as long as she can cure her disease, no matter what the side effects are, she feels that she can accept it. This is, after a long time, Qin Zhu couldn't think of how to say it. After all, this matter seemed a little mysterious. "What is it, husband? Tell me quickly." Seeing that Qin Zhu stuttered for a long time and couldn't say anything, Zhu Mengyo couldn't help but urge him anxiously. Gritting his teeth, Qin Zhu still didn't know how to describe it. Could it be that as long as you drink this medicine, you will listen to me in everything? Regardless of whether Zhu Mengyo believed it or not, he didn't believe it. Finally, Qin Zhu had no other choice, so he stood up and shook Zhu Mengyo's hand and came to the doghouse again. "Husband, what are you doing?" Being pulled by Qin Zhu to the doghouse, watching him squat down to toss a few little guys, Zhu Mengyo couldn't help but have a few black lines on her forehead. "What are you talking about? I asked you to tell me the side effects of the medicine. Why are you tossing a few little guys?" However, Qin Zhu ignored her expression changes. After taking a little guy out of the doghouse, he started to toss. And Zhu Mengyo gradually found some differences. Several Alaskans that were still making a fuss became honest after seeing Qin Zhu. Especially the little Alaskan that Qin Zhu caught, not only did not make a fuss just now, but was quiet, just like a good baby. Not only that, the little guy snuggled up to Qin Zhu's hand, and from time to time stretched out his pink little tongue to lick Qin Zhu's big hand intimately. Zhu Mengyo, who was watching from the side and was a little jealous, could not help but squat down and stretched out her little hand, wanting to touch the other little Alaskan dog at the door of the doghouse. But the reaction of the little Alaskan dog made the beautiful Zhu very sad. Although it did not avoid her touch, it was not very quiet. Not only did it struggle to escape, but its 4 short legs were also kicking. "How can your dog be so obedient?" Releasing her hands, Zhu Mengyo, who was a little frustrated, stared with a pair of beautiful eyes, as if she understood something. "Just as you see." Shrugging his shoulders, Qin Zhu put on a mysterious smile and said, Although my potion is very effective, its side effect is also very obvious, that is, it will become very obedient. Do you mean that Erica and the others have drunk that? After listening to Kinzu's explanation, Zhu Mengyo's face was a little strange, and she looked outside the villa curiously. She said, why would Kinzu trust a few foreign girls so much? It turns out that there is such a reason. Yes, it's just like what you thought. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu gave Zhu Mengyo an affirmative answer. But after he said that, Zhu Mengyo really hesitated. She couldn't wait to recover her health, but the side effects were a bit too serious, right? To put it bluntly, this was like losing her own personality. By then, it was not certain whether she would be the one controlling this healthy body. Wife, don't worry. Seeing this, Kinzu put his arm around her slender waist and promised very seriously, give me some more time. Since I said I can cure your disease, I can definitely cure it. Nodding silently, Zhu Mengyo leaned her little head on Kinzu's shoulder, feeling very complicated. Hope was right in front of her, but she didn't have the courage to take that last step. In this regard, Kinzu could do nothing except hug her tighter. Okay, wife, it's getting late. After sitting on the sofa for a while, Kinzu raised his hand to check the time and asked with a smile, what do you want to eat tonight? I'll ask Green to make it for you. After the voice fell, Kinzu waited for a while, but still didn't get a reply. He turned his head and looked at her in surprise. It didn't matter if he didn't look at her. After looking at her, he found that the girl actually fell asleep on his shoulder. Not only that, perhaps because she dreamed of something delicious, a trace of water could be clearly seen at the corner of the beautiful Zhu's mouth. With a big smile and shaking his head, Kinzu carefully put her body straight, then gently picked her up and put her directly on the spacious bed in the master bedroom upstairs. After covering her with the quilt, Kinzu came downstairs and waved to Anderson at the door, indicating that he should go to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The beautiful Zhu didn't sleep for long. Kinzu had only eaten a few bites of dinner when he heard a few shouts from upstairs. Husband, where are you? Hearing this, Kinzu didn't care about eating anymore. He took 2 steps at a time and rushed to the second floor in 0.01 seconds. Wife, what's wrong? Kinzu rushed to the bedroom, but he saw Zhu Mengyo's delicate face like a pear blossom in the rain, and his heart was suddenly a little panicked. Husband, I'm so scared. After saying this with a sob, Zhu Mengyo threw herself into Kinzu's arms and cried. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? He gently patted Zhu Mengyo's back, and asked after her emotions calmed down a little. Yeah, it's so scary. Lying on Kinzu's shoulder, Zhu Mengyo's heart gradually calmed down, but her hands were still tightly holding her and refused to let go. Kinzu smiled, picked her up by the waist, and walked downstairs step by step. Although being held by Kinzu, Zhu Mengyo did not struggle at this moment, which was very different from her previous performance. In the past, even in the ranch villa, if Kinzu wanted to hug her downstairs so intimately, she would hide away with a sweet smile. Downstairs, in the restaurant, Anderson helped Kinzu open a seed, and then retreated with great discretion. Wife, come and try this, the best French black caviar. Although it is not the top quality, it is also the best quality. Picking up a spoonful of round and plump black caviar with a spoon, Kinzu smiled and handed it to the lips of the beautiful Zhu, without mentioning the incident just now. Opening her cherry lips, Zhu Mengyo was very obedient and put this spoonful of caviar worth at least $5 into her little mouth. Well, it tastes good, husband, you try it too. Nodding, after swallowing the caviar, Zhu Mengyo took another sip of the mellow champagne, and then a smile appeared on her face. Chapter 888. Paying for it? Rumble, with a low roar, a silver white plane slowly landed at Boston Airport. Hey, little guy, don't move. Zhu Mengyo, who was holding 3 little Alaskans, was walking and calling out in a hurry. Kinzu was following behind and found it a little funny. He hurriedly walked a few steps to catch up. Wife, if you can't hold them, just let them hold them. Isn't it tiring? No, I can hold them. Zhu Mengyo pouted and rejected Kinzu's proposal very proudly. Now is a good time for her to cultivate feelings with the little guy. How can she give up like this? Thinking back to the past few days, the little Alaskans and Kinzu were so close, and the beautiful Zhu was jealous from the bottom of her heart. But there was nothing she could do about jealousy. Who let him use the cheating device? Okay, no one will compete with you. Pulling the suitcase with one hand and holding the remaining little Alaskan with the other hand, Kinzu shook his head helplessly and could only quickly catch up. After leaving the airport, he saw his sturdy Knight the 15th driving towards him quickly. "Boss, you're back." He braked suddenly, and before the Knight the 15th stopped, I and Ween pushed open the door and got out. "When will you change your impetuous temper?" Kinzu rolled his eyes at the two girls, motioned them to put their luggage away, and got in with little Alaska in his arms. "HMPH, you've become a lot more talkative after going out." Ween pouted and muttered softly, then went forward to help Dale put the luggage away. "You, keep your voice down." Dale smiled and shook her head. She had no way to deal with this little sister who was several years younger than her, so she could only scare her. "If the boss hears it, be careful that he will deduct your salary again." "HMPH, he won't hear it, and besides, I didn't say anything bad about him." She stuck out her tongue, and although she said so, her voice was obviously 8 degrees lower. After quickly putting away the luggage and sitting in the driver's seat, Elsa turned around and asked with a smile, "Boss, where are we going first?" Kinzu knew that she meant to ask him if he wanted to go to the store. But after several hours of flying, Kinzu really didn't want to bother anymore, so he simply waved his hand. "Forget it, let's go back to the manor." After saying that, Kinzu seemed to suddenly remember something and said, "By the way, wife, call Eva and ask her to prepare some food. I'm almost starving." As she spoke, Elsa had already started the Knight the 15th and rushed out of the airport at a speed of 100 meters. If the airport security hadn't already recognized this iconic car, they would probably have put up the railings to arrest people. The north wind blew on Kinzu's face, making him feel a little cold even though he was sitting in the car. He rolled up the car window, wrapped himself in his coat, and smiled at Zumengyo beside him. "Wife, how nice it is to stay in Los Angeles. It's spring and flowers are blooming. Why do you come back so early?" Zumengyo rolled her eyes, pouted her lips, and stared at Kinzu with a bit of hostility. "Yes, not only is it spring and flowers are blooming, but there is also a Hollywood beauty coming to visit all day. Of course you feel comfortable." Kinzu was choked by this sentence and couldn't speak. He smiled awkwardly and touched his nose, feeling helpless. "Damn, how do I know that she still comes to see me every day?" And the questions she asked were all kinds of strange. Today she asked about the price of the ranch, tomorrow she asked about the price of cattle and sheep, and the day after tomorrow she asked about the price of wheat. She even asked if there was any ranch for sale around Kinzu, saying that she also wanted to buy one. This completely irritated the beautiful Zhu who had been listening. What does it mean? Is this the rhythm of trying to pay for it? So without saying anything, she directly booked a return ticket for the next morning, without even leaving Kinzu time to say goodbye. Kinzu was at a loss for words about the little temper of the beautiful lady Zhu, and he also felt very happy. See? He is also a very charming man. Even a goddess-level woman like the beautiful lady Zhu would be jealous of him and even feel a little crisis. Doesn't this prove anything? "Hiss, wife, what are you doing?" Just as he was thinking about Kinzu in a strange fantasy, he felt a small hand suddenly appeared on his waist. Although it was not very cold, it was really powerful. "HMPH, what are you thinking about? Even saliva is coming out." Zumengyo pouted and pushed Kinzu away with a look of disgust, as if there was something bad. After being said by Zumengyo, Kinzu subconsciously raised his hand, but found nothing. When he looked up, he saw the arc at the corner of the beautiful lady Zhu's mouth, and Kinzu immediately understood. It feels like he was fooled by this girl again. "Little girl, just wait and see how I'll deal with you tonight." After touching the little Alaskan in his arms, Kinzu gave up the idea of playing around in the car and said something vicious. "HMPH, who's afraid of who?" Although she felt a little embarrassed, Zumengyo's temper also came up. She snorted and puffed out her chest with some disdain. From the look of it, it seemed that she was saying, "Come on if you have the guts." Although they were arguing, Kinzu didn't dare to have any physical contact because of the little guy in his arms, which made him feel really uncomfortable. And Zumengyo seemed to have noticed this. Not only did she not calm down, but she became more and more presumptuous, constantly provoking Kinzu with words. In this way, all the way down, when they returned to the ranch, Kinzu was already on the verge of going berserk. What are you doing? Be careful of the dog." As soon as the Knight the 15th stopped, Zumengyo noticed something was wrong and screamed and wanted to run under the car. But she realized it too late. Before she could make any move, she felt her slender waist being firmly fixed by a strong hand. "Hey, guess what I want to do?" Kinzu leaned over and pecked the earlobe of the beautiful Zhu, and said something with a sly smile. HMPH, you don't even think about it. Being suddenly attacked and hearing those dirty words said by this bad guy, the beautiful Zhu felt that her whole body became a little sore, as if she had been electrocuted. Boss, we're here. At this moment, the car doors suddenly opened, and Dale's figure appeared in front of the two. Dale, come and save me quickly. Seeing Dale appear, Zhu Mengyo seemed to have found a savior, and asked for help in a somewhat powerless manner. But what surprised her was that Dale just glanced at her lightly, with a slight smile on the corner of her mouth, and then she carried out a few little Alaskans that were a bit in the way one by one. Chapter 889 Initiation Ceremony. Don't do this, I don't want it anymore. In this bedroom with simple decoration but bright colors, a charming voice of begging for mercy suddenly sounded, which made people blush. But following this begging for mercy, it was another man's panting that made people's heart beat faster. Don't want it anymore? Why don't you want it anymore, wife? Come quickly. When Qin Zhu came downstairs lazily in his pajamas, rubbing his sore waist, it was almost evening. Boss, what do you want to eat? Seeing Qin Zhu coming down, Eva, who was in a daze on the sofa in the living room, stood up immediately. Just make something for me. I'll just fill my stomach first. Leaning casually on a sofa, his feet involuntarily rested on the coffee table not far away. Qin Zhu looked around and asked curiously, by the way, Eva, where's Xiaora? She went out to play with a few little ones. Thinking of Qinru, Eva's mouth curved up involuntarily, and even the jealousy she had just felt disappeared. She glanced at Qin Zhu with some sympathy, and said nothing. She turned to the kitchen to prepare food. But just this one glance made Qin Zhu feel a little weak. Ahem, Eva, is this girl still angry? The main reason why Qinru was not brought along this time was because she had to take English lessons now, so Qin Zhu didn't feel guilty at all. But Qinru was different. Her brother went out to play, and he dared not bring her along. So these few days, there was a phone call every day, and the tone was getting worse day by day. In this regard, Qin Zhu could only shake his head and sigh. Why is she so ignorant? My brother and your sister-in-law are going on their honeymoon. Do they have to take you, a little light bulb? But it was useless for him to think about it. The little girl was still in a bad mood. Helpless, Qin Zhu hurriedly finished his afternoon tea, and then brought another portion to Zhu Mengyu and fed her to wheat. When everything was done, he walked out of the villa quickly and started looking for the girl. Fortunately, although the villa is large, the little girl and the little guys usually like the big lawn in front of the villa the most. As soon as he stepped out of the gate of the villa, Qin Zhu saw the little girl squatting on the ground alone, surrounded by pets of all sizes, as if there was something lively. Curiously, Qin Zhu came over and suddenly felt a little bit amused. It turned out that the one surrounded in the middle was the little Alaska that had just been brought back and had only been walking for a short time. And the two stupid huskies, Daho and her, were surrounding the little Alaskas. There were Dio and Xiaoyu, a pair of jaguars that looked more like dogs than tigers. There was also Betty, a little brown bear, squatting on the ground, standing upright, and looking around curiously. Of course, the two squirrels would not participate in such occasions. They would only hide on the pine branches nearby, cross their legs and watch the fun. Yes, that's right, the two North American red squirrels, under the guidance of Qin Zhu, have learned to cross their legs. Qin Zhu glanced at the two little guys on the branches and muttered to himself, these two guys are really good at imitating, much better than other animals. Shaking his head and getting rid of the messy thoughts in his mind, Qin Zhu smiled and asked, little sister, what are you doing? Don't scare the little guy. Qinru gave Qin Zhu a head back, pouted her little mouth, stared at the little guys in front of her without blinking, and seemed not to notice Qin Zhu's arrival. Qin Zhu didn't think about it, he took something out of his arms with a smile, shook his head and sighed. I said I brought it as a gift for a girl, but since no one wants it, I'll throw it away. When the little girl heard the word gift, her ears obviously swelled, her eyes rolled, and she secretly glanced back. But Qin Zhu was so cunning, seeing that the little girl was unwilling to turn around, he quickly put the thing away, leaving only the logo of the packaging box exposed. But just this one logo made the little girl completely give up resistance. Brother, what did you bring? Give it to me. Seeing this, Qin Zhu smiled and raised the thing in his hand. Well, now you know to call me brother. Here's my brother, I just didn't see you just now, don't be so stingy. Rolling his eyes, Qin Zhu lowered the things in annoyance, and scolded with a smile. Why do you become the stingy brother, your little girl? It's the brother who is stingy. After taking the box, Kinru opened the gift swiftly, pouting and muttering. You didn't even take me with you when you go out to play, and you still say you were not stingy. Kinzu was speechless after being rebuked by her. He smiled awkwardly and changed the subject and asked, Girl, what are you doing? Don't scare the little guys. Kinru, who was busy opening the gifts, replied without raising her head. Of course it is an initiation ceremony for them, don't you understand this? What? Kinzu looked at the group of little guys in amazement when he heard the words. This is called an initiation ceremony. Wow, the latest model of Pinga mobile phone, thank you brother. Kinzu, who was in a daze, was almost frightened by the sudden scream of his little sister. Silly girl, what are you yelling for? Reaching out and giving the little girl a slap, Kinzu rubbed his ears and asked unhappily. Tell me, what kind of initiation ceremony is this? Is it just to scare them? Bad brother, you are so cruel. Rubbing her little head, Kinru muttered in dissatisfaction. However, seeing that her brother's hand was raised again, she quickly waved her hand. Okay, I'll say it. Rolling her eyes at Kinzu, Kinru looked at the latest model of Pinga mobile phone in her hand and sighed helplessly. Forget it, people have to bow their heads under the eaves. Silly girl, what are you mumbling about? Kinzu, who was getting impatient, squatted down and fiddled with the little guys, saying, Hurry up and take the little guys back, don't mess around, or see how your sister-in-law will deal with you. Humph, my sister-in-law won't deal with me. Bending down and picking up a little guy, Kinru smiled a little, and said excitedly, Brother, look, in ancient times, when people took concubines into the house, didn't they have to hold an entry ceremony? They also had to arrange for the eldest sister and the second sister, etc. Oh, what are you doing? Covering her little head, Kinru stopped and stared at Kinzu with dissatisfaction. She was really angry now. Humph, what are you doing? Kinzu stared back without showing any weakness. I'm afraid this little girl won't be dealt with now. What the hell is going on? Thank you for the reward and support from the Lonely Traveler. Chapter 890 Meals reduced by half. After returning to the villa, Zumengyo had already gotten up. When she heard what Kinzu said, she immediately giggled. Husband, look, your sister has already thought about it for you. When are you going to take a concubine? What are you talking about? Kinzu rolled his eyes unhappily and touched his nose with a guilty conscience. It's okay for a child to make trouble, but why are you meddling in it? Aren't you afraid that she will scare your little guy? After Kinzu said this, Zumengyo remembered that the little Alaska she brought back from afar had just been frightened. It's all your fault. If the little guy was frightened, I'll settle the score with you. After saying this, the beautiful Zhu hurried to find her little Kateri. But to her surprise, after going out, she saw a few little guys playing behind that big and two huskies, and they didn't look frightened at all. Well, these guys are really brave. Seeing the helpless look of Daha and Xiaohe, Kinzu, who followed behind, couldn't help but laugh. It's good this way. It's better than those timid guys. Glancing at the little lop-eared rabbit curled up not far away, Zumengyo shook her head helplessly. This little guy is good in everything except being a little timid. It can't be helped. Rabbits are timid, not to mention that they are facing their natural enemies. After smiling and comforting Zumengyo, Kinzu turned around and returned to the sofa, thinking in his mind, should I feed this little guy some spiritual liquid? After all, they are already my pets. As long as they don't die of natural causes, I will definitely not abandon them. In this case, it is necessary to properly increase their physical fitness. Thinking of this, when it was time for dinner, Kinzu used a drop of spiritual liquid to add some ingredients to the dinner of many little guys. This is incredible. In the past, for a little bit of vegetables with spiritual liquid, several guys would have stayed in the vegetable garden, not to mention the diluted spiritual liquid now. No more, see, no more. Kinzu held up an empty bowl, with a helpless look on his face. Woof woof woof, or woo, squeak, for the global words, a group of little guys, including Daha and a few little Alaskans, protested one after another, and for a while, the villa was in chaos with dogs barking and bears roaring. Be quiet, Kinzu was a little annoyed by the noise, and his face sank, and he scolded with a serious expression. As if he understood, Kinzu's voice fell, and the villa, which was originally noisy like a vegetable market, suddenly became quiet. Even Betty's roar, which had just been roared, was frightened and was forced to be suppressed, and her originally soft hair stood up. Listen to me, Elle. Go back to sleep quickly. Whoever doesn't go will have their food rations halved tomorrow. Ouch, woo. After whimpering a few times, the little guys looked at each other, all a little scared, but none of them wanted to go back now. All food rations will be reduced, swoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Before the words fell, Betty and the others turned around and rushed back to their own nests. Are you kidding? Reducing food rations by half is still bearable, but if all food rations are reduced, will people, oh no, will animals be able to survive? The little guys who had just arrived were still a little uncomfortable with this sudden situation. They stood there in a daze, not knowing how to react. What about the agreement to advance and retrieve together? What about the agreement to not give up until food is taken away? What about your moral integrity? Oh? Glancing at the 4 little Alaskans on the ground, Kinzu said unhappily, "You are very brave. If you don't leave, there will be no food tomorrow." Swish, 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 the little guys finally reacted. Without any hesitation, they turned around and ran out. Ahem, woof woof, woo woof, these idiots, covering his forehead, Kinzu looked at the little guys who bumped into each other, and hurriedly got up to pick them up. Idiots, why do I feel like you are even dumber than that husky? Husband, how were those little guys feeding now? Are they full? You have to feed them well. It took me a lot of effort to bring them back. Zumengyo said to Kinzu with a smile on her face. When Kinzu heard what Zumengyo said, he brought the empty basin in his hand to Zumengyo and showed it to her. With a wry smile, he said to Zumengyo, "Do you need to ask this? Look at what they have done to this bowl. It's so clean. I've never brought back such a clean bowl." Zumengyo took the bowl from Kinzu's hand and took a look. She found that it was just as Kinzu said. The whole bowl was as clean and smooth as if it had been washed. So Zumengyo nodded to Kinzu. "I didn't expect that the little Alaskans I brought back could adapt to the food so quickly. It seems that the pets I brought back were indeed quite spiritual. Otherwise, I would not have chosen them." Zumengyo looked at Kinzu with a somewhat arrogant look, as if she was demonstrating to Kinzu. After Kinzu saw the demonstration in Zumengyo's eyes, he couldn't help but secretly complain in his heart. If I hadn't added the spiritual liquid to the food, this situation wouldn't have happened. However, when I thought about these little Alaskans, they would have to compete with the pets I raised for food tomorrow. Kinzu felt a headache. Now he has more and more pets. If he produces less spiritual liquid in the future, it will not be enough to feed these pets. However, Kinzu also believed that he could feed these pets. After all, they were all pets that he cultivated with his heart, and he also had to cultivate all of them. Since he raised them, he had to do his best to feed them all. Kinzu's eyes showed a firm look. He believed that he could definitely cultivate all of the pets he raised. He believed that the spiritual liquid could definitely improve their physical fitness. Now Zumengyo has slowly brought these pets to her home, so she has the obligation to use the spiritual liquid to make their physical fitness stronger, so that they can live longer. Thinking of this, Kinzu handed the food bowl in his hand to Zumengyo, motioning Zumengyo to help him clean it up. Zumengyo rolled her eyes at Kinzu. She didn't expect Kinzu to be so lazy. Chapter 891. I'm tired. Even washing a food bowl had to be done by himself, but Zumengyo didn't say much and took the food bowl from Kinzu's hand and went straight to the kitchen. Kinzu couldn't help but smile when he saw Zumengyo like this, and there was a hint of doting in his eyes. Although Zumengyo didn't talk to him normally, she was still quite obedient in front of him. Kinzu retracted his gaze and walked into his room, because he needed to make more spiritual liquid. If more spiritual liquid was not made, the food of these animals might become a problem, because they were already used to the food with spiritual liquid. If one day they could no longer use the food with spiritual liquid, Kinzu believed that they would not be able to eat that kind of food at all. This was like a rich man who had been eating a life of luxury, and suddenly he had to live a poor life where he could only eat vegetables and white rice every day, which would definitely make him unable to adapt. So Kinzu made up his mind that he must make more spiritual liquid. After all, he needed spiritual liquid to operate. Kinzu slowly raised his footsteps and walked towards his room. After a while, Zumengyo slowly walked out of the kitchen. She washed the basin and put it back where it should be. After taking a look at Kinzu's room, she walked in slowly with a smile on her face. After a night of silence, Kinzu was already busy in the kitchen when he woke up the next morning, while Zumengyo was still enjoying her morning bedtime on the big bed in the room. Kinzu had already prepared all the breakfast in the kitchen, and also prepared the food that his pets needed for the morning. At the same time, he put 1 or 2 drops of the spiritual liquid in his hand into the food bowl. Then he put the food that the dogs needed to eat into the bowl, and after a while, Kinzu suddenly heard a dog barking, and he saw all the pets he raised running over. It seemed that they were attracted by the spiritual energy he released. Kinzu couldn't help but shook his head secretly. He didn't expect that these pets he raised would be used to the spiritual energy he released. They were so sensitive to the aura liquid that they could sense the presence of the aura as soon as he dropped it. So Kinzu looked at the group of pets he raised with a wry smile, and they started fighting for food again. Kinzu could see that the 4 little Alaskans brought back by Zumengyo were squeezed out by his pets. It seemed that they were not even taken to share food. Kinzu's face sank when he saw this. He slowly walked to their side and shouted at them. "What are you doing? When did I teach you to eat alone like this? They are your future partners, do you know? You must take them to share some." After Kinzu finished speaking, the pets that were fighting for food stopped eating and turned to look at Kinzu. Kinzu saw his pets after he finished speaking, and they turned around and looked at him with a vicious look. He couldn't help but be a little stunned, and then he felt a little hairy in his heart. Because he felt that the eyes of his pets were very intelligent, and it seemed that they were going to attack him. So Kinzu felt a little scared, thinking that these pets were going to attack him, but he was relieved the next second. Because he found that these pets involuntarily made way after hearing what he said, and it seemed that they were ready to let the 4 little Alaskans eat the food first. Kinzu nodded when he saw that his pets were so obedient. Then he patted the heads of his pets and praised them, saying that their behavior was very correct. "Yawn, husband, what happened? Why are you scolding these pets so early in the morning?" Zumengyo appeared behind Kinzu slowly with a trace of sleepiness on her face. Kinzu heard Zumengyo's voice coming from behind him. Then he turned his head and found that Zumengyo's eyes were full of dark circles. It seemed that she didn't rest well last night, so Kinzu was a little confused and didn't know what happened to Zumengyo last night. So he hurriedly stood in front of Zumengyo, held her hand and asked her carefully. Zumengyo's face turned red because of Kinzu's sudden holding of her hand. However, she did not take back Kinzu's hand, and said to Kinzu shyly, "Isn't it because of you? If you hadn't snored yesterday, I would have slept very soundly, but I didn't expect you to snore in the middle of the night, which made it impossible for me to fall asleep." Kinzu heard what Zumengyo said and understood why Zumengyo's eyes were full of dark circles. It turned out that he snored last night, but he didn't snore normally. Because he had been working on the effects of the spiritual liquid, he didn't snore at all, but it might be because he worked overtime to make the spiritual liquid last night, so his sleep condition was a bit poor, so he snored. Kinzu felt a little sorry for Zumengyo and he thought of this. He shook her hand and then took her to the kitchen. The pets behind them smiled humanely. They seemed to be looking forward to Kinzu and Zumengyo. Kinzu took Zumengyo to his dining table and put the things on the table. He handed it to Zumengyo and said to her carefully, "Eat it quickly, this is breakfast. You can have a good sleep after you finish eating." After Zumengyo heard what Kinzu said to him, a hint of pride appeared on her face, and she said to Kinzu in a coquettish way, "It's because you snored last night that you have dark circles under your eyes, but considering that you got up early this morning to make breakfast, I forgive you." After hearing what Zumengyo said, Kinzu quickly saluted, and then shouted to Zumengyo, "Your Majesty is right, I will take care of your breakfast in the future." Zumengyo was amused by Kinzu's move, and then nodded. Okay, this is what you said, breakfast will be contracted by you in the future, don't cheat." Kinzu couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't expect Zumengyo to agree to his idea so quickly. He was just talking casually but didn't expect Zumengyo to be so serious. So a helpless bitter smile appeared on Kinzu's face. Chapter 892 Restarting Work. Ding-ling-lin, ding-ling-lin, a quick and loud cell phone ringtone came from the coffee table under the porch into the ears of Kinzu, who was dozing off with his eyes squinted. "Who is this? Can you spare my sweet dreams?" Without even opening his eyes, Kinzu reached to the side and grabbed the ringing cell phone. But when he answered the call and heard that voice on the other end clearly, his somewhat confused expression was stunned. "Lin Yu. What? Landlord Kin doesn't recognize me so soon." Lin Yu, who was on the other end of the phone, curled her lips and stood at the gate of the Tycoon manor, looking at the 2 female bodyguards staring at her expressionlessly, feeling depressed. After all, she was a frequent visitor to the Tycoon manor and had some friendship with Kinzu, but she was blocked at the door by his bodyguards. "Ahem, what's wrong, Miss Lin? Why are you so angry?" Kinzu touched his nose, not knowing what happened yet. He sat on the recliner and looked at the little Alaskans playing in front of him. He felt funny. HMPH, what are you talking about? Looking at the construction team behind him, Lin Yu suppressed her depression and muttered, I'm outside your gate now. The bodyguards stopped us from entering. Are you going to repair the river? Ah? You're here. Qin Yu stood up in a hurry. He was so excited. You're finally here, you damn girl. How long have I been waiting for you? Qin Yu felt a little uncomfortable looking at the half-finished project every day. But there was nothing he could do. The weather didn't allow it. What could he do? Nonsense, do I need to call you if you don't come? Lin Yu rolled her eyes. She felt like going crazy. Are you going to let me in or not? Don't worry, I'll let them in right away. Qin Yu seemed to have finally reacted. He laughed twice, and after hanging up the phone, he called Dale directly. Boss, what's wrong? Dale, who received Qin Yu's call, was still a little confused, wondering what the boss would call her at this time. Dale, who is at the gate today? Let them in quickly. Okay, I got it. Dale hung up the phone, feeling confused, and reached out to touch her waist, trying to take out her walkie-talkie. She was also a little puzzled. From the boss's tone, someone was stopped outside, but why didn't the people on duty report to her today? It's not that there were no visitors stopped outside in the past, but every time the female bodyguards on duty would report to Dale, and she would decide whether to let them in or persuade them to leave. But today, why was there no movement? Well, where's my walkie-talkie? Dale reached for her waist, but found nothing. She was stunned. What happened? She quickly reached for her hand and touched her body several times, but the final result was still hard for Dale to accept. It's gone? How could it be gone? What's wrong? Dale. Erica, who was standing by, looked over curiously. Erica, lend me your walkie-talkie. Dale took Erica's walkie-talkie without explaining. She directly connected to the two female bodyguards on duty outside and signaled them to let her in. After receiving Dale's order, a female bodyguard in the sentry box waved her hand, and the gate of Deccan Manor slowly opened. Humph, you look down on people. Lin Yu curled her lips, adjusted her black-framed glasses, turned around and got into a red BMW next to her. In the manor, Dale was rubbing his head, thinking about where he had been today and where his walkie-talkie would go. But after thinking about it and searching around, she still found nothing. Erica, who was helping to look for it, thought about it and suddenly said, Dale, do you think someone took the intercom? Dale didn't say anything when she heard it, but her face became a little heavy. She had also thought about this problem, and that's why she was a little worried. Losing a walkie-talkie is not a big deal. Even if this walkie-talkie is the most advanced one on the market and is worth a lot of money. The important thing is, who could take her walkie-talkie away without her knowing it? What was his purpose after taking the walkie-talkie? What's wrong? What are you doing here? Just when the two were silent, Qin Yu just came out of the villa and was a little confused when he saw this. However, before the two of them could speak, Qin Yu suddenly seemed to remember something and asked again. By the way, Dale, who is the bodyguard outside today? Why didn't you report when someone came? Speaking of this, Dale was a little embarrassed. After coughing twice, she explained. Boss, they reported to me, but my walkie-talkie was lost and I didn't hear it in time. Oh, that's it. Waving his hand, Qin Yu didn't take it seriously and smiled and said, aren't there more in the warehouse? Just go and get one yourself. As he was talking, he saw a convoy coming in front, led by a big red BMW. Okay, you guys go and get busy, I'll go to greet the guests first. Qin Yu, who was about to go forward to greet Lin Yu, suddenly remembered something and hurriedly turned around and ran into the house. What's wrong with the boss? Seeing this, Dale didn't say anything, but Erica couldn't help her curiosity and looked at the place where Qin Yu disappeared. Maybe they are afraid that the wife and the mistress will fight. Dale shrugged, and the smile on her face was very strange, as if she had seen something interesting. Since you are here for construction, why don't you go and make some arrangements? Zhu Mengyo, who was dragged out by Qin Yu, looked a little dissatisfied. She was just playing with her little babies when she was dragged out by this guy. Isn't this inconvenient? Touching his nose, Qin Yu looked at Zhu Mengyo beside him and explained with a wry smile. The leading manager is a woman. It's not easy for us to cause misunderstandings when we are together. You are the only one who has too many things to do. She rolled her eyes at Qin Yu coquettishly, but Zhu Mengyo did not refuse again. Instead, she stretched out her hand to hold Qin Yu's arm and acted like a little bird. Not to mention, Zhu Mengyo, who was already slender, was not as cute as those petite girls when she acted like a little bird, but she also had a different charm. When the two of them walked downstairs and out of the villa, Lin Yu's big red BMW just stopped. When Lin Yu, with her long legs, pushed open the door and stepped out of the BMW, Qin Zhu felt a white and tender little hand on his waist. "Hiss, wife, what are you doing?" Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 893 Explosion. Haha, Lin Yu, long time no see, how were you doing recently? Qin Zhu forced a smile on his face, enduring the severe pain from the soft flesh on his waist, and went to meet him with Zhu Mengyo. Fortunately, Zhu Mengyo did not embarrass Qin Zhu too much. When Lin Yu looked over, she quietly loosened her hands. However, after loosening her hands, the beautiful Zhu whispered to Qin Zhu's ear, "HMPH, I'll settle the score with you tonight." Qin Zhu's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and the smile on his face was inconvenient, but he whispered in injustice, "Wife, what are you doing? What's wrong with me? What's wrong?" After rolling her eyes at Qin Zhu, Zhu Mengyo slowly loosened her hands, and a very bright smile appeared on her face, but her tone was very cold. "You know what's wrong." Although Qin Zhu wanted to argue a few more words, Lin Yu, who was wearing a beige windbreaker with a snow-white high-necked wool sweater underneath, had already come to the two of them. "Landlord Qin, it's been a long time since we last met. I'm so touched and honored that you still remember me." Lin Yu came to the two of them, looked at Zhu Mengyo with a smile, and then stretched out her hand to shake hands with the two of them. "Qin Zhu, this is your wife, right? She's so beautiful. How should I address her?" No, Miss Lin is really beautiful." Before Qin Zhu could speak, Zhu Mengyo took the initiative to release her hands, and greeted him with a bright smile on her face. "I'm Zhu Mengyo, Qin Zhu's girlfriend, and I'm glad to meet you." Qin Zhu, who was standing aside, looked at the two women chatting enthusiastically in front of him, and it seemed as if 10,000 beasts were galloping through his heart. "I'm just here to pick up a partner, not a lover, so why is it like this?" "Well, let's go inside and talk, the wind outside is still a bit strong." Seeing that the two of them were still interested in continuing the chat, Qin Zhu quickly stretched out his hands and waved, smiling and suggesting, "Yes, Miss Lin, let's go inside. It's quite windy outside." Following Qin Zhu's words, Zhu Mengyo smiled and made a gesture of invitation. After hearing what the two said, Lin Yu realized that she didn't come here today to make friends or get angry. "No, I'm not here to be a guest this time. I have something to do here." Waving her hand, Lin Yu smiled and declined the invitation of the two, and then asked with a smile, "Mr. Qin, has the plan changed? If not, we will continue the construction according to the original plan." No. Relieved, Qin Zhu smiled and nodded, indicating, "You can just follow the original plan to construct. The raw materials and so on are still piled up in the warehouse. You can go and see if there is anything missing. In that case, let's go and get busy first." Nodding to the two, Lin Yu turned around and waved to the workers who had been waiting for a long time behind him. "You know what, husband, this woman is quite impressive." Watching the backs of the group leaving, Zhu Mengyo glanced at Qin Zhu beside her, with a hint of unkindness in her tone. "Ahem, wife, what are you thinking about?" Touching his nose, Qin Zhu took Zhu Mengyo and walked into the villa. He didn't want to be laughed at by Dale and the others here. After everyone left, Dale sighed and leaned against the wall of the villa helplessly. "Don't worry, you'll definitely find it." Seeing this, Erica comforted her somewhat powerlessly. She also knew that since someone could get it once without you knowing it, there would be a second time and a third time. Thinking of this, she hurriedly said that a chill came over her and she couldn't help shivering. "Wife, you have to believe me, it's really like this." In the villa, on the large leather sofa, Qin Zhu hugged Zhu Mengyo and comforted her softly. "Really? Just a cooperative relationship?" As if she believed Qin Zhu's explanation, Zhu Mengyo leaned her little head on his shoulder and asked softly, "Then have you ever thought about taking it a step further?" Qin Zhu rolled his eyes speechlessly. "I do want to, but do I dare to say it?" "Qin Zhu, it's really nothing." Before Qin Zhu could speak, Zhu Mengyo seemed to be talking in her sleep, whispering softly, I'm an imperfect woman, destined not to give birth to your children, but I really can't live without you. If you want, I don't mind. What? Qin Zhu, who was already a little guilty, was stunned by Zhu Mengyo's sudden change. He looked at the girl in his arms stupidly, and couldn't believe his ears. Really, Qin Zhu, I'm telling the truth. Being stared at by Qin Zhu's burning eyes, Zhu Mengyo didn't dodge at all, and nodded very seriously. No, how could it be possible? Although his heartbeat had already accelerated, Qin Zhu still shook his head firmly. Wife, you have to believe me, I will definitely be able to cure you. But, no buts. Waving his hand to interrupt Zhu Mengyo's words, Qin Zhu looked at her with a very serious look. Even if I don't cure you in the end, let's adopt one. This is nothing at all. Although she didn't know whether what Qin Zhu said was true or not, Zhu Mengyo was still moved to tears. She hugged Qin Zhu's neck with both hands and couldn't help but shed tears. Qin Zhu, you are so kind. Qin Zhu felt a sense of emotion in his heart as he held the beautiful Zhu, who became a little weaker because of crying. He never thought that the beautiful Zhu, who was like a proud daughter of heaven, would have such an idea. Regardless of whether her idea was true or false, regardless of whether she was taking the opportunity to test him, Qin Zhu felt that this woman was worth his efforts. The two hugged each other for a while until a few little guys came to their side with a hum, and then they separated. What's wrong? You're hungry again after just eating? Letting go of Zhu Mengyo, Qin Zhu bent down and pinched the belly of a little Alaskan, and said with a smile, Wife, you really brought a few foodies. What foodies? Letting go of Qin Zhu, Zhu Mengyo sat up and looked at the little guy, muttering unhappily, I'm just in the growth period, okay? Shrugging his shoulders, Qin Zhu had to go prepare dog food for the little guys. There was no other way, because his wife liked them. However, after Qin Zhu put away the plates of the little guys, he was a little dumbfounded. What do you want to do? Looking at the little guys squatting in a row around him, staring at him intently, Qin Zhu scratched his head. Woof woof woof, oh, squeak, thanks to Brother Xiao Jing dollars for the reward of 1,000 Kidian coins, and thanks to Book Friend 20180132201222855 for the reward of 500 Kidian coins. Thank you. Chapter 894 Erika's Discovery. Ding ding ding, dang dang dang. In the long silent pasture, the sound of machines and stones colliding with each other was heard again. Dale, you, look at what it is. Erika pointed to a group of little guys not far away, and her voice was a little hesitant. What? Looking in the direction of Erika's finger, Dale said helplessly, Aren't those the new little guys brought back by the boss? Don't you know them? Of course I know them, but what's that in the middle of them? As if she saw something, Erika stretched out her hand, pulled Dale over and ran over there. What is this? Dale, who was still a little confused, was stunned when she ran in front of the little guys. Woof woof woof, surrounded by two figures that suddenly appeared, the little Alaska roared with some dissatisfaction. Although we are acquaintances, this is not a reason for you to stop us from playing, right? Little guys, where did you find this? Dale did not retrieve because of the roars of the little guys. Instead, she squatted down and took a black object from the mouths of the stunned little guys. Woof woof woof, woof woof woof. Now, the little guys who had just knocked out a bunch of big dogs and big tigers were not happy. What's wrong? What's wrong? Hearing the sound, Qin Zhu hurriedly ran out of the villa, and he was a little speechless while running. What's going on? He just suppressed the little guys who wanted to protest. Why is there trouble now? Boss, nothing happened. Seeing Qin Zhu coming, Dale quickly put the things in his hand behind him, and the smile on his face was a little awkward. Oh, it's you. Nodding, Qin Zhu stopped and shook his head helplessly. Don't tease them just because they are cute. These guys are really too troublesome. Don't worry, boss, we didn't tease them. Seeing that Dale seemed to want to say something, Erika quickly took over the conversation. Although Qin Zhu felt a little strange, he didn't have time to care about these things now. Seeing that the little guys were fine, he waved his hand and turned to go into the house. When he left, the little guys who were originally calling happily suddenly wilted. Woo, woo, seeing that the situation was not good, the little Alaskan lowered his head and tucked his tail between his legs, whimpering and trying to escape from the scene. Stop, where do you want to go? As soon as he stretched out his hand, the little guys all fell into Dale's arms. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get away at all. Come here, where did you find this thing? Take me there quickly. Holding the walkie-talkie in his hand, Dale's face was very ugly. Woo-hoo, not knowing whether they didn't understand or were just pretending, several little Alaskans shook their heads together, swaying left and right to try to break free from Dale's arms. But who is Dale? She's from the American Women's Special Forces. Not to mention that there are only a few little Alaskans. Even if you have a few strong men, she can knock you down in one blow. Maybe they really couldn't hide, or maybe they really understood something. The little guys looked at each other and stopped struggling. Seeing this, Dale retracted her white and tender hands, stood up, patted the dust on her arms, and followed the little guys, walking step by step. What's going on? Erica was a little puzzled. Did you still expect these little guys to really lead us to find something? Hush, just follow. Waving her hand, Dale signaled Erica not to make a sound, and the two of them followed silently. It only took Dale a few months to go from not caring about the pets brought back by her boss to being surprised and trusting them blindly. For no other reason, just by looking at the performance of Daha and Xiaohe, as well as Dahu and Xiao, Dale believed that her boss had magic. This is also one of the reasons why she always obeyed Qinzyu's words even though she had not used much spiritual liquid. Don't say that bodyguards must listen to their employers. Are there not many employers who are killed or betrayed by their own bodyguards? Hey, what are you doing? Qinzyu, who was rubbing the shoulders of the beautiful Zhu on the soft and spacious leather sofa in the living room, looked at the four little guys who suddenly broke in, and Dale and Erica behind the little guys, and his expression was a little strange. Boss, nothing. Unexpectedly, Qinzyu was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Dale, who followed in, looked a little embarrassed and waved her hands repeatedly to indicate that she was fine. But this time, Qinzyu didn't believe it. What on earth have you guys done? Qinzyu waved at the little guys who were still walking upstairs, pretending to be very stern, and scolded them a few words. Hearing Qinzyu's scolding, the little guys looked at each other, then drooped their heads, as if they were guilty and accepted the punishment. Boss, let them take us to find it first. Seeing that the little guys were not leaving, Dale felt a little anxious and couldn't help but urge them. Looking for something? What are you looking for? Qinzyu stopped what he was doing and sat up curiously. Nothing, just a little thing. Seeing Qinzyu suddenly stand up, Dale subconsciously looked at Erica next to him, and his face flushed. Because he now had a bad premonition, if his guess was correct, this ending would be really embarrassing. Is that so? Qinzyu nodded, looked at the little guys on the carpet, and then looked at Dale, whose expression was a little unnatural, and smiled and waved. You guys are busy, I won't join in the fun. Hearing this, Dale couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and pouted at the little guys who had stopped. Suddenly, the little guy, who had regained some courage because he found a backer, was completely wilted. Even the owner admitted that he was scared. What else can he be proud of? Thinking of this, the poor little guys looked at each other, and rushed to the second floor with their short legs. Seeing this, Dale whispered goodbye to Qinzyu, and took Erica, followed the little guys, and walked upstairs step by step. What are they doing? Seeing that they had already gone upstairs, Zhu Mengyo, who was lying on the sofa and enjoying Qinzyu's attentive service, also sat up with some doubts. Who knows? Shrugging his shoulders, Qinzyu lay down again and said with a smile, Wife, you have enjoyed it just now, now it's my turn, right? Don't you want to go upstairs and take a look? Ignoring Qinzyu, Zhu Mengyo raised her head and looked upstairs, as if she heard some noise coming from upstairs. Chapter 895. Demolishing the house. What's so good about this? Waving his hand, Qinzyu was unwilling to get up and waste his time. His curiosity was not as strong as that of a woman. However, when a woman's curiosity is aroused, nothing can stop it. So, although Qinzyu had been waiting for a long time, he still did not get the service he imagined. Wife, what are you doing? Turning his head with some doubt, Qinzyu could only see the beautiful back of the beautiful Zhu. I'll go and take a look, wait for me. Waving his hand, Zhu Mengyo did not even raise her head, took small steps, and ran up to the second floor in a few steps. This girl. Shaking his head helplessly, Qinzyu turned his head back again, lying weakly on a sofa, waiting for his wife to come back boredly. However, before waiting for a few minutes, he heard footsteps coming from the stairs again. Without even raising his head, Qinzyu asked teasingly after hearing the voice, Wife, what's up? I told you there's nothing to see, right? Boss, you should go up and take a look. After a long silence, Zhu Mengyo's voice did not come out as expected, but Dale's voice rang out instead. What's wrong? Kinzu felt something was wrong when he heard Dale say that, and he jumped up immediately. Dale did not say anything, and waited for Kinzu to catch up, then turned around and ran to the second floor. When they reached the second floor, they stopped at the door of a bedroom. Dale pointed inside with her hand, and said with a strange expression on her face, "Boss, look here." "Here? What's wrong here? What's wrong?" Kinzu was about to ask what was wrong when he was shocked by the scene in front of him and almost jumped up. "What's going on? Was it robbed?" Looking at the messy bedroom with down and broken steps everywhere in astonishment, Kinzu could not believe his eyes. It seems that these guys did it. Seeing Kinzu come in, Zumengyo came out and shook her head with a bitter smile. "Honey, we seem to have found some troubles." "They did it?" "Impossible." Listening to Zumengyo's words, Kinzu blinked in disbelief. What kind of international joke is this? Although he also knows that some dogs are very laborious to raise and often have their homes destroyed. But isn't that talking about the stupid husky? These little guys are authentic Alaskans. And, they are still so small. Kinzu measured them with his hand. Well, they are only about 10 centimeters above the ankle. Such a small Alaskan can destroy the house like this. Well, although there are 4 of them. It's absolutely true. Except for these little bad guys we brought back, the guys in our house are all very honest. At this point, Zumengyo looked at Kinzu with some admiration. "You're really lucky. You've met some quiet guys. This, are the ones you met restless." Kinzu was a little embarrassed by Zumengyo's praise. "What kind of luck is this? It's all thanks to the pet function, okay? You mean, these guys are the murderers who are causing trouble here?" Pointing at the little guys and the messy little bedroom, Kinzu's expression was a little bit funny. "Boss, it's not just this one." At this moment, Dale stretched out his hand to push open another door, and his expression became more interesting. "What? There's more?" Hearing this, Kinzu was a little stunned, turned around and ran out. Good guy, it's true. When he arrived at the door of the room, looking at the cotton quilt and Simmons' bed inside, Kinzu helplessly supported his forehead, saying that he was very helpless. "Boss, there's more here. There's also here. There's also here." One cry after another, constantly entering Kinzu's ears, made him even more depressed. In the end, after a rough count, except for Kinzu's master bedroom and the other 2 locked guest rooms, almost all other guest rooms were destroyed. "Ah, my quilt." Kinru, who had rushed back from outside after hearing the news, shouted madly when she saw the quilt in her bedroom. Don't shout, we need to stay calm." Reaching out to hold Kinru, Kinzu took a deep breath and waved his hand. "Suppress these criminals for me and wait for trial on another day." Poochie, except for Kinru and the beautiful Zhu who couldn't help but giggle twice, several female bodyguards including Dale were a little puzzled. Criminals? Where are the criminals? Suppress them? Where to suppress them? Huh. After seeing that they didn't move, Kinzu remembered that he was not in China. Damn, I was pissed off by these guys. Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and pointed at the little Alaskans. "Take these guys away and get a cage to lock them up." Zumengyo nodded and said with a smile, "Just lock them up in the doghouses we brought a few days ago." After Dale and Erica took the little guys away one by one, Kinzu bent down to pick up the scattered silk cotton of the brothers, and said with a wry smile, "Now we have to buy quilts and beds quickly, otherwise we won't have a place to sleep at night." Nodding, Zumengyo stretched out her hand to check the time, and said with a smile, "Then let's go quickly, it will be bad if we are late." "Okay." Kinzu didn't hesitate anymore. He turned and looked at Kinru, who was pouting beside him, and smiled and ordered, "Girl, help Sister Eva to clean up these guest rooms, and your sister-in-law and I will buy new ones." "Ah, you want me to clean it up?" Kinru opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but when she saw the new mobile phone and tablet computer Kinzu bought for her on the desk, she closed her mouth again. "Okay, I'll clean it up, but where should we put these things? Have we thrown them away?" "Thrown them away?" Touching his nose, Kinzu looked at the mattresses and quilts with several damaged corners, and felt a little reluctant. After all, they were bought for several $1,000s each. It would be a pity to just throw them away like this, right? Don't throw them away. Ask your sister Dale and the others to help. Throw these things into the warehouse and forget about it. Waving his hand, Kinzu sighed, and took Zumengyo downstairs. When they got downstairs, Dale and the others had already locked up the little guys and were locking the door of the doghouse. It seemed that even Dale was a little afraid of this little guy, afraid that it would run out by itself. Walking over with some amusement, Kinzu repeated what happened just now, and prepared to take Zumengyo to the town to buy a few more sets of new furniture. But before he walked away, the little guys in the cages behind him began to whimper softly. It seemed that they were admitting their mistakes. Chapter 896. Wrong? Do you know you're wrong? Turning around and looking at the little Alaskans whimpering behind him, Kinzu squatted down with a serious expression. Little brats, if I don't teach you a lesson today, how can I survive in the future? Even the big brother husky of your team of destroyers doesn't dare to show off in front of me. Woo-hoo, woof woof woof, yo, are you still not convinced? Feeling happy, Kinzu reached out and tapped the foreheads of the little guys, and scolded with a smile. If you are not convinced, just stay here. When you are convinced, you can eat. Woof woof woof, woof woof woof. Amid the little guy's somewhat aggrieved whimpers, Kinzu stood up, took Zumengyo out of the villa, got on the night the 15th prepared by Erica, and drove towards Revere. After Kinzu and the others left, Kinru and Eva began to clean up the mess in the room. First, they gathered the quilts that were torn into pieces on the ground, and then pushed the bitten sofas and other things into the corridor, waiting for Dale to bring people to move them away. These little guys are really good at making trouble. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, Kinru sat on the leather that had been damaged by several little guys, complaining. I don't know how these guys did it. How can they get to such a high place? Eva, who was preparing to clean the floor, raised her head curiously and looked over in the direction of Kinru's gaze. Yeah, it's so high, how can the little guys get there? Touching her chin, looking at the bite marks on the leather sofa cushion, Eva showed a thoughtful expression on her face. Sister Eva, what did you say? Because Eva's voice was a little soft, Kinru, who was sitting on the sofa, didn't hear it clearly, and couldn't help but look up. I mean, how did the little guys get up to such a high place? She raised her hand and pointed at the sofa, with a strange expression on her face. She didn't say she hadn't noticed it just now, but now after Kinru's reminder, she realized that this height was simply impossible for the little guys to reach. Especially the quilt on the bed, although it was very likely dragged on the ground and pulled down by the little guys. But there are so many rooms, it's impossible for them to be dragged on the ground, right? That's right. After hearing Eva's words, Kinru seemed to react and stood up to look carefully. The little guy is only this high, it's impossible for him to jump up. She stretched out her hand and gestured, and the puzzled expression on Kinru's face became more intense. Yeah, don't you mean, it wasn't these little guys who did it? Looking at Kinru, Eva said uncertainly. Is it really not them who did it? Looking at the sofa, the bed, and the pile of quilts, Kinru was also a little confused. At this time, Dale, who was walking upstairs with Aya and Ween, looked at her sister curiously and asked, have you packed all these? We are moving downstairs. No, sister, wait a minute. Waving her hand, Eva quickly stopped her sister and told her what she had just discovered in detail. This is true. Looking at the place Eva pointed out, Dale's face turned red. This was not because she was angry, but because she felt a little ashamed. She was such an excellent soldier who retired from the special forces, but she didn't notice these details. It must be said that this was a failure. Do you want to call my brother? Taking out her new mobile phone, Kinru couldn't wait to clear the grievances of the little guys. Goodbye. Waving her hand, Eva smiled and said, anyway, these things have to be bought, so let the boss buy things with peace of mind. Oh, okay. Kinru pouted with some disappointment, put away the phone, turned around and sat down on the sofa, cracking her chin and waiting for her brother to come back. It's just a pity that women who go shopping are a little scary. Even as a lady, when shopping together, they can't help themselves. So, several people waited for a whole morning, but there was no sign of anyone. Finally, Eva couldn't help it. After calling Erica, she found out that they would not come in the morning. Brother is really something. He didn't call before he came back. Kinru, who was sitting next to the dining table, pouted her little mouth. She had long lost the excitement of discovering the secret at the beginning. Hee, little girl, your brother is going on a date, and you want to go with him. Eva smiled and teased Kinru on the other side. However, the smile on her face looked a little bitter. Okay, let's eat first. I guess they will be back soon. Dale saw that Kinru wanted to say something, and was afraid that her sister would feel uncomfortable, so she smiled and took over the topic. Listening to Dale's words, Kinru seemed to think of something. After secretly glancing at Eva, she closed her mouth. However, in her heart, she complained about her brother. Do all men become like this when they have money? After lunch, they waited for a while, but Kinzu still didn't come back. Eva couldn't help but get anxious. She looked at Dale beside her and asked, "Sister, let's move the things to the warehouse first, and let the boss see them when he comes back." "Okay, let's move them there first." After looking at the sky, Dale signaled a female bodyguard to go. After the pickup truck drove over, she took Aya and Ween and started moving things directly. According to Kinzu's intention, these swear words should be handed over to those cowboys, or a few workers should be found to do it. After all, letting women do rough work always feels like a cruel hand destroying a flower. But Dale and several female bodyguards didn't do it. Dale even asked Kinzu directly, "Do you look down on us women?" In this capitalist country that shouts that everyone is equal, Kinzu dare not say so. Not to mention whether they are happy or not, if those feminists hear it, they may fence their own ranch. However, these female bodyguards are not the weak women who can compare to them. They are even better than the men in moving things. It only took more than 10 minutes to move the rooms on the second floor. "Why hasn't my brother come yet?" Kinru, who was a little tired, looked at the time and said with a bit of impatience, "Hee, it should be here soon." Looking up at the sky, Eva also showed an expectant smile on her face. As if to confirm her words, as soon as she'd finished speaking and the sunset in the sky came out, a convoy of cars arrived at the ranch. "Look, isn't that here?" Chapter 897. Who were the accomplices? When Kinzu hadn't gotten out of the car yet, Kinru had thrown away all her frustrations of the day and rushed over to him impatiently. "Brother, do you know that those little guys are innocent?" "What?" Kinzu looked at his excited sister in front of him after getting out of the car with Zumengyo, and his mind was still confused. "Little guys, those little Alaskans." Kinru raised her little face with an excited smile on her face, and kept chattering. "They are innocent. We have discussed this with Sister Dale many times today. It is impossible for them to bite the quilt and the sofa back." "You mean, little Alaskans?" Kinzu finally understood what his little sister was talking about, and couldn't help but look at Zumengyo beside him. Shrugging, Zumengyo said that she didn't know either, so the two of them looked at Dale and Eva with curious eyes, wanting to know if it was true. "It's true." Noticing the eyes of Kinzu and the others, Dale nodded gently and explained, "Boss, after you left today, after Miss Kinru's reminder, we discussed it carefully again. It is absolutely impossible for them to cause such a big damage. Did you hear that, brother?" I reminded them. Hearing that Dale actually gave a face like this, Kinru's little face was a little red with excitement. In her heart, she had a lot more good feelings for this usually cold big sister. "Let's go and take a look." After looking at the beautiful Lady Zhu again, Kinzu didn't even care about the workers who delivered the goods, and followed Eva and others to the warehouse. The driver who delivered the goods looked at Kinzu's back, and then looked at the extremely luxurious mansion in front of him. Thinking back to the two fully armed female bodyguards waiting at the gate when they came, they opened their mouths and closed them tightly again. Although the working class in the United States has always been very powerful, there are also many smart people who know who to offend and who not to offend. Kinzu followed a few people to the warehouse. With the help of the light, he also saw those suspicious bite marks. It's true. Touching his nose, Kinzu felt a little ashamed. He really didn't look at it much in the morning. "It's all my fault." Seeing Kinzu's guilty expression, Zumengyo also said with some self-blame, "If I hadn't said it was them, you wouldn't think it was them." "It's okay, now is not the time to talk about this." Smiling and waving his hand, Kinzu's mouth twitched, and he shrugged with a helpless expression. "Naughty little guys, if I don't take care of them, they really think I'm a useless owner. Ha, I think it's because you didn't feed them yesterday." Zumengyo, who was standing aside, raised the corners of her mouth slightly, revealing a very beautiful arc, and teased, "They are expressing their dissatisfaction." Dissatisfied? Kinzu snorted coldly, turned around and walked outside. "I want to see how they are dissatisfied." By now, it has become very clear that in addition to those little Alaskans, how many other dogs in the house can destroy the house. He was surprised at the beginning. How come this Alaskan's ability to destroy the house is even better than that of the husky? "Hey, husband, what are you going to do?" Seeing Kinzu's unfriendly expression, Zumengyo advised with some worry. "They are still young, don't hit them." Kinzu turned his head speechlessly, and asked with a smile, "Wife, do I look like a person who likes to fight?" Raising her little head, Zumengyo stared at Kinzu's face carefully, and then nodded very seriously. "Yes." After returning to the door of the villa, it was not until he saw the big trailer parked at the door that Kinzu remembered that he still had business to do. However, thinking of those hateful little guys, Kinzu was no longer in the mood to do business. He waved his hand and called a little sister who was following him like a tail. "You go and watch over them, let them put their things in place, I'll go find those guys." "Okay." Nodding, Kinzu said with some disappointment. "Brother, when we find those guys, we must beat them up. They tore my favorite sheets." "Okay, brother, got it." Smiling and waving his hands, Kinzu thought, "Your little guys, wait and see how I'll beat you up." Seeing Kinzu coming over aggressively, the brothers Gaha and Dao, who were playing in the corner of the rockery, seemed to feel something was wrong and ran away. Stop right there. When they got closer, they saw that the guys not only did not stop obediently, but ran faster. Kinzu was so angry that he shouted loudly, "Whoever is running, I'll break his legs." Squeak! There seemed to be several harsh break sounds in his ears. After a sudden break, the guys who were running vigorously still slid a long way before they stopped. Woof woof woof, or several low whimpers sounded in Kinzu's ears one after another. "You idiots, get up quickly." Looking at the guys stumbling in front of him, Kinzu laughed and scolded unhappily. Woof woof woof. Hearing Kinzu's voice, Daha, who was already whimpering, suddenly became energetic and his wailing became louder. "I'm talking about you, the captain of the house-destroying team, get up quickly." Bending down, Kinzu picked up Daha's little ears and gently helped it up. "Tell me, did you guys do it?" Woo-hoo! Daha, who was originally trying to lie on the ground and not get up, hummed a few times helplessly when Kinzu helped him. Seeing this, Kinzu's mouth curled up slightly, and he held Daha and Xiaohe in one hand and lifted them up. "You guys stay here, I'll come over to deal with you later." After threatening Dao and Xiao on the ground, Kinzu picked up the two little guys and threw them on the car. "Stay here." After threatening Daha and Xiaohe again, Kinzu turned back and brought Dao and Xiao over. "By the way, Dale, where is Betty? Did you participate?" Kinzu, who was about to get in the car, felt like something was missing, and couldn't help but look back at Dale and asked, "I'm not sure about this." Dale looked around in embarrassment. She really didn't notice how many guys appeared at the crime scene. There was no way, because when Kinzu wanted to install surveillance, he didn't install it in the villa for his own privacy. Chapter 898. Everyone should support themselves. Since you don't know, take them together. Waving his hand, Kinzu would rather kill the wrong one than let him go. With Kinzu's order, little Betty was quickly brought over by Dale. Although Betty, who came to the front of the car and saw the big brother, seemed to understand something and began to whimper. "Oh, needless to say, there must be a share for you." Holding Betty's little round ears, Kinzu laughed and scolded a few words in a bad mood, and then put the little guy with the big brother. "Since you were good brothers, I will send you on the road together today." As the car door slammed shut, the little guys in the car were completely dumbfounded. Looking at the big brother, Betty roared twice with grievance, which meant, "Didn't you say it was okay?" Daha chose to ignore Betty's roar. It and its brother Xiaohe looked at each other, and there was a suspicion in their eyes. The master will not really punish us, right? But Kinzu's performance just now clearly showed that he was going to destroy them in a humane way, right? Roar! The big tiger brothers hiding in another seat saw that the leader had stopped making any sound, and they couldn't help but get anxious. "Dad, come and save us, I won't dare to do it again." For a moment, the small rear compartment was particularly lively with the roars of tigers and bears, plus two low barks of dogs. Kinzu, who saw all this through the review mirror, had a smile on his face. "Little guys, I will either kill you or scare you to death today." Soon, Night the 15th stopped at the door of the warehouse. The door opened, and Kinzu and Dale, holding one in each hand, walked in with Betty in their armpits. In order to create an atmosphere, Kinzu deliberately did not turn on the light but took a flashlight and brought the little guys to a pile of damaged furniture and sheets. Kinzu took out a sharp knife and slowly played with it in front of the little guys. While playing with the knife, he asked in a sinister voice, "Tell me, who did this?" Woo-woo-woo! The 5 little guys, including Betty, shook their heads frantically and tried to retreat. However, Dale behind them was well prepared. When Kinzu started to scare them, they had already blocked their way back. As a result, the little guys who found that they could not escape became a little anxious and began to roar wildly. "Shut up, whoever yells, I'll hear it." As if it was agreed, before Kinzu's voice fell, the little guys had already shut their mouths and stood there motionless, afraid of making any sound. Tell me, who did you learn this from? Kinzu pointed at the heads of the little guys one by one and scolded them angrily. Isn't it just that I didn't give you food? You dare to destroy it? What's the matter, are you dissatisfied? If you are dissatisfied, you can go out and find food by yourselves. I won't feed you any more meals. Let Kinzu chatter on and on. The little guys lowered their heads without any reaction. Kinzu was so angry when he saw this. You bastards actually played the silent game for me. Come on, who wants to go out and hunt by yourself? Stand up. Since the little guys didn't cooperate, Kinzu didn't say anything and just took ruthless action. This time he was not joking with the guys, but really had this idea. Look at the guys in front of him, a bear, 2 tigers, and 2 evolved huskies. Not to mention this pasture near the Appalachian Mountains, which is rich in resources. Even in those big cities made of steel and concrete, there is no need to worry about starving. But after hearing what Kinzu said, the little guys all stepped back a few steps, fearing that if they stepped back a little later, Kinzu would think they wanted to fly solo. Hey, what do you mean? You all want to fly solo? Seeing this, Kinzu smiled and nodded seriously. Well, since you all stepped back, that means you all want to go out and hunt alone. In this case, woof woof woof, roar roar roar, or. Before he finished speaking, the confused little guys began to roar impatiently. What's going on? Did we hear it wrong, or did you say it wrong? Didn't we agree that those who stand out will go hunting? We brothers are all stepping back. What's wrong? Are you dissatisfied with something? Kinzu pretended not to understand what the little guys meant and asked with a puzzled look on his face. Woof woof woof. After hearing what Kinzu said, Daha roared twice and began to shake his head frantically, which meant that we were not satisfied with anything. Oh, you are not dissatisfied with anything, then it is decided happily. Kinzu raised the corner of his mouth and waved his hand, making it look like the matter was settled. Roar, roar, roar. Daha was a little anxious, and pushed Daha aside with his butt, and came over himself. What's wrong? Do you want to go hunting by yourself and give it to them to eat together? Touching his chin, Kinzu looked at Daha, who came forward and said with a smile, Don't think that I won't deal with you just because you have a good father. Stay aside. Roar, roar, roar. Daha roared anxiously a few times after hearing this, trying to explain something. But when the tiger behind him saw Kinzu pick up the knife, he was so scared that he bit his brother's tail and pulled it back. Well, that's right, little tiger is still obedient, smarter than your brother. Nodding with satisfaction, Kinzu turned his gaze to Betty again and asked with a smile. They all have no objections, what about you? Do you have any objections? Although Kinzu's expression was smiling, Betty didn't dare to curse in her heart when she saw him waving the knife with a cold light in his hand in front of her. Well, the premise is that he can curse. Ouch, After a few reluctant whimpers, Betty raised her hands in surrender. There is a saying that goes, people have to bow their heads under the eaves. Well, you guys know what's best for you. Putting away the knife, Kinzu pointed to the pile of furniture behind him that was torn and messy, and said to the little guys, I won't take advantage of you. See the things behind, even those that you destroyed. Looking in the direction of Kinzu's finger, the little guys lowered their heads helplessly. Only they could understand the pain in their hearts. It's good that you see it. Kinzu ignored their somewhat resentful eyes and said with a smile, I won't make it difficult for you. When you catch prey that can offset these losses, the owner will still give you food. Chapter 899 Failed Debut. Woof woof woof. The early morning in March was broken by a few immature barking sounds. In the morning mist, a luxurious villa lit up with lights, reflecting the 2 figures at the door of the villa, who looked like a pair of immortal lovers. Husband, are you really letting them go hunting like this? Zumengyo looked ahead, where there were 5 little guys, taking heavy steps and embarking on a day's journey. What else? Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu said somewhat nonchalantly, How can you see the rainbow without going through the wind and rain? Why would an eagle push its chicks off the cliff? Isn't it to let them grow up? But, Zumengyo pouted and looked at the small figures that had disappeared in the morning mist with some heartache, and said dissatisfiedly, There is no need for us to let them go hunting. Isn't it too dangerous? If something happens, I wonder if you will regret it. Okay, wife, look at you, didn't we agree on it yesterday? Helplessly rubbing the waterfall-like black hair of the beautiful Zhu, Kinzu said somewhat dotingly. Don't worry, how could I let them go by themselves? Didn't you notice that the white tiger followed them? Huh. It really is. Zhu Mengyo turned around when she heard it, and then she found that the jaguar that had been lying under the pergola of the villa had disappeared. Of course, don't I feel sorry for the little guys? Shrugging his shoulders, Qinzu looked at Zhu Mengyo, whose face had become a little strange, and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Wife, what's your expression, don't you believe me?" "Ah, no. Zhu Mengyo came back to her senses, and a smile as beautiful as a flower bloomed on her face. She leaned over and kissed Qinzu's old face. "Husband, you are still the best. Come on, one." One is not enough, don't run." Qinzu, who was suddenly attacked by Zhu Mengyo, came back to his senses and wanted to take the beauty into his arms with a sly smile. But how could Zhu Mengyo, who was well prepared, be caught by Qinzu? After turning around to avoid Qinzu's claws, she ran upstairs with a sweet smile. "No, bad husband, I'm going to bed first." Although they said so, when the two came to the bedroom one after another, they fell on the soft big bed and staged a passionate drama. After a long time, the clouds cleared and the rain stopped. Qinzu lay on the bed, letting the beauty in his arms fall asleep, and he shifted his thoughts to cheese. Just like Zhu Mengyo, he never relaxed about the safety of the little guys. This time, in order to take the opportunity to train these little guys, he not only let the white tiger drive in front and drive away some large prey, but also let Cheese follow behind them to prevent any accidents. It can be said that Qinzu has taken into account everything that should be considered, and just watched the little guys to see if they can do well this time. When Qinzu shifted his sight, the scene he saw almost made his nose crooked. It turned out that the little guys did not head towards the mountains as expected, but instead hid in a pasture not far from the villa, surrounding a large piece of beef and gnawing vigorously. Turning his head to look at Zhu Mengyo, who was sleeping beside him, Qinzu felt angry and amused. No wonder the girl asked Ale to accompany her out last night. I was worried for a long time at the time, thinking that something had been exposed. It turned out to be for this. However, looking at the little guys who were almost done with the big piece of beef, Qinzu could only shake his head helplessly. It was meaningless to say these things now. Today's debut was probably just like this. As expected by Qinzu, when it was noon, the little guys found a big piece of beef in a place again and gathered together to have a good meal. While eating, the guys were still grinning and communicating, and they seemed very proud. "Little bastards, let you show off for a while, I'll see what you'll do tomorrow." Qinzu raised his mouth slightly, revealing a wicked smile, and began to think about how to punish these lazy guys. Qinzu, who was thinking, suddenly felt that his arm was being pushed. After coming to his senses, he saw Zhu Mengyo looking at him angrily. "Honey, is it pretty?" Staring with a pair of big eyes that seemed to be able to speak, Zhu Mengyo asked with some resentment. "Ah, what?" Being confused by Zhu Mengyo's sudden question, Qinzu looked around blankly. It would be fine if he didn't look, but when he looked, Qinzu suddenly remembered that the person sitting opposite him was Lin Yu, the black-haired and bespectacled woman. "Ahem, wife, listen to my explanation, I really didn't look at her." Touching his nose awkwardly, Qinzu lowered his head and whispered in Zhu Mengyo's ear. I don't care if you look at it or not, what does it have to do with me?" Zhu Mengyo curled her lips, although she was a little happy in her heart, but there was a trace of disdain on her face. Qinzu was watching from the side and found it funny. Just as he was about to continue to say something, he was suddenly interrupted by a teasing full of laughter. "Qinzu, I know you two were in love, but you don't have to show off like this." Lin Yu put down the knife and fork in her hand, glanced at Qinzu thoughtfully, and teased with a smile. "You have to take care of the feelings of us singles, Eva, don't you think so?" Yes. Eva, who was seriously dealing with the lunch in front of her, was dragged in for no reason, and her expression on her face was a little innocent. "How can you show off, Xiaoyu, you are talking nonsense." Awakened by the voice, Zhu Mengyo realized that she was almost close to the arms of this bad guy. Her little face turned red, and she moved to the side like a guilty thief. "Ha, wife, it's useless for you to move, everyone has seen it." Qinzu laughed at this, and ignored Lin Yu's teasing. Instead, he looked at the pretty face of the beautiful Zhu, which was a little red, with a smile on his face. All right, that's enough. If you keep doing this, I won't eat anymore." Lin Yu pouted, feeling annoyed, and picked up the knife and fork in front of her again. "That's right, are you going to eat or not? If you keep making trouble, go and accompany her and the others." Zhu Mengyo, who was a little embarrassed and annoyed by Qinzu's look, turned her head and glared at him, and scolded him in a coquettish voice. "Accompany them? That's not bad either." Picking up their chopsticks, picking up a piece of beef and putting it in his mouth to chew, Qin Zhu looked at the beautiful Zhu with a smile on his face, and teased meaningfully, accompanying a few little guys, not only do you not have to work, but you may even be able to eat beef every meal. What a good life. I'm already on the way back to Shanghai today. I wrote 2 chapters on the train. Please reward and subscribe. Chapter 900 The Inexplicable Lin Yu. What did you say? Why don't I understand? Listening to Qin Zhu's meaningful words, Zhu Mengyo's expression became a little unnatural. Hey, don't you understand? Touching his chin, Qin Zhu raised a smile at the corner of his mouth, staring at Zhu Mengyo without blinking. Come on, eat quickly, let's ignore this guy. Being stared at by Qin Zhu made Zhu Mengyo feel a little uncomfortable, so she simply turned around and didn't look at him, and asked Lin Yu to continue eating. Seeing this, Qin Zhu didn't continue to pester her, and began to feast on the pile of delicacies on the table. It's strange to say, if it was someone else, they would have been tired of eating such a big fish and meat for a few months. But Qin Zhu didn't feel that way at all. Not only that, every time he saw the fragrant fried beef or the golden fish fillet, Qin Zhu felt that he couldn't eat enough. Eat slowly, who's trying to snatch it from you? Zhu Mengyo, who had originally decided not to talk to Qin Zhu, couldn't help but remind him in the end. It would be fine at other times, but today there are still customers, so you should pay attention to your image, right? It's okay, Sister Mengyo, it's good this way. For some reason, Lin Yu smiled and persuaded. Men, if you chew slowly like us women, it will be uncomfortable. Qin Zhu, who had just put a piece of steak in his mouth, almost choked to death when he heard it. After swallowing the steak in his mouth with difficulty, Qin Zhu raised his head and looked at Lin Yu with a very sad and angry look. What are you trying to do, you little bitch? Are you trying to sow discord? Qin Zhu felt the needle-like gaze coming from his side, and he hated it in his heart. Without looking, Qin Zhu could imagine how sharp the look in the eyes of the beautiful Zhu was at this moment. But Lin Yu seemed to have not seen Qin Zhu's murderous look, and lowered her head to deal with the rich food in front of her. Lin Yu didn't say anything, and Qin Zhu didn't know what to say. Zhu Mengyo snorted and lowered her head. In an instant, the atmosphere at the table fell into a strange silence. Hey, brother, I'm done, you guys eat slowly. Qinru, who noticed that the atmosphere was a little wrong, was the first to abandon her brother and ran back upstairs. I'm done too. Seeing this, Eva also laughed dryly, put down her chopsticks and walked out. Well, are you still eating? In the end, when there were only 3 of them left at the table, Qin Zhu touched his nose and asked awkwardly. No more. Pushing the bowl, Zhu Mengyo stood up. Although she still had a smile on her face, that smile made Qin Zhu feel a little guilty. After she went upstairs, Qin Zhu looked at Lin Yu opposite him, smiled bitterly and rubbed his forehead. Miss Lin, how did I offend you again? I offended you. Lin Yu looked up in surprise, as if she knew nothing, and said in a strange way. What are you saying? You didn't offend me. Well. As soon as he saw her like that, Qin Zhu knew that asking further would not have any good results, so he simply waved his hand. Okay, it's my bad luck today, do you still want to eat? If not, we'll end it. No, I'm not full yet. Seeing that Qin Zhu wanted to run away, Lin Yu raised the corner of her mouth and hurriedly stopped him. Rolling his eyes, Qin Zhu's body, which had just stood up, sat down again. Since Lin Yu wanted to play, he simply let go. Isn't it just teasing people? Who wouldn't do this? It's always him who teases others, but he didn't expect that he would be teased today. Okay, come on, let's eat together. As he said that, Qin Zhu reached out and grabbed a big lobster, tore it in half, and began to eat it in big mouthfuls. However, he had been silently watching Lin Yu from the corner of his eyes. He wanted to know what this girl wanted to do. However, he had not figured out the girl's purpose until the end of this awkward lunch. Husband, what do you think she wants to do? In the bedroom on the 2nd floor, Qin Zhu, who had sent Lin Yu away, was lying on the sofa with Zhu Mengyo in his arms. At this moment, the beautiful Zhu no longer had the cold expression she had when she was downstairs at the beginning. The smile on her face was so gentle that it seemed to melt people's hearts. I'm also puzzled. I don't understand what she wants to do. Shaking his head, Qin Zhu retracted his boundless thoughts, and his expression was a little strange. Did you hook up with her before? As if she had thought of something, Zhu Mengyo smiled and teased. Now that she has seen me, she is here to make trouble with you. Hey, why did you hit me? Zhu Mengyo said halfway through a sentence and couldn't help but complain with some dissatisfaction. What do you think? Not wanting to continue the previous topic, Kinzu changed the topic and said with a sly smile, "Wife, tell me why there is so much less beef at home." "Ah, what?" As if she didn't understand half of it, Zumengyo raised her little face and looked at Kinzu innocently. What?" Kinzu laughed twice and asked, "Wife, tell me, what have you done?" Don't you know everything?" After turning over and escaping from Kinzu, Zumengyo snorted and said a little arrogantly. In fact, she herself was a little confused. Obviously Kinzu didn't go out today, how could he know that I prepared food for the little guys? Could it be that the woman named Dale betrayed him? But that didn't make sense. If Dale betrayed him, then Kinzu would definitely not let the little guys go so easily in the morning. Fin est caption much as great as Pelaga has to el final. No se olviden de dull like busgasms contenido exclusivo ixo inmediato. Suscribete news to Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, suscription o dona que nos anima a continuar. Great as a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.